Chapter 65. Luoboat, who had just suffered a loss, became very well behaved. Without Luoboat's incitement, White also stopped causing trouble. The afternoon of magic history passed peacefully as the junior magisters dozed off. After class, Dake didn't go to the library as usual. Instead, he went directly to Professor Kazayer's office. He hesitated for a moment, but still knocked on the door. "Knock. Come in." Professor Kazayer's voice came from inside the office. Dake turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. Professor Kazayer was sitting behind the desk. There was a large pile of homework on the desk, but it obviously didn't belong to a first-year student. "Dimmu, you've come just in time." Professor Kazayer put down his pen and jumped down from the high stool. Dake asked, "Professor, is there a result from the flower card research?" "That's right." Professor Kazayer opened the drawer, took out a flower card, and waved it in front of Dake. It was like a child showing off a new toy. Dake couldn't help but smile. He closed the door and quickly walked behind the desk. The professor handed him the card and said proudly, "Here, infuse it with magic and see." Dake picked it up and examined it carefully. This flower card wasn't the original green rose that Professor Kazayer had. It was another one that came from who knows where. "A student gave it to me," Professor Kazayer said humorously. Dake blinked. Professor Kazayer said helplessly, "Well, someone was secretly playing with it in class, so I confiscated it. Anyway, don't worry about its origin. This is something I carefully made last night." The flower card depicted a pink and purple butterfly orchid. It was an orchid with petals like a butterfly's wings. In the flower language, it said "I love you" and symbolized noble and elegant love. Dark injected a trace of magic into the card, and the butterfly orchid on the card turned into a vivid butterfly. It wasn't a butterfly orchid, but a butterfly. Pink and purple butterflies fluttered their wings and danced. Dake waved his card, and they seemed to be attracted to him. Circling around his card, specks of fluorescent pollen leaked from the tails of the butterflies, as if they were holding long tails. She was already so stunning during the day, not to mention the pitch-black night. Dake asked in surprise, "Professor, how did you do that?" Professor Kazayer smiled and said, "Just a little trick. This isn't a magic card. If you like it, you can take it. It has the same origin as the flower tiles, so perhaps it can guide you to the source. There are many secrets in the academy, and we encourage the students to explore them on their own. Of course, don't forget the midnight curfew." Dake left the office with a trace of doubt. Professor Kazayer's words didn't give him a good feeling. Could it be that he has already investigated and confirmed that there is no danger? Or perhaps, the danger has already been dealt with? Otherwise, why would he mention the principle of encouraging the students to explore on their own? Dake put the butterfly orchid card into his card bag, knowing that he couldn't get any more information from Professor Kazayer. "It seems that if I want to continue the investigation, the only thing left is White. The midnight curfew is a reminder. But Luoboat has already paid the price for the night trip. Well, what should I do next?" While thinking, Dake returned to the dormitory of the Aristocrats' Academy. He didn't want to think too much about it. After all, the hero's son was there. Dake even suspected that White had already gone deep inside. The taboo love card was the proof. Instead of taking the risk to go deep, it was better to wait for the secret to surface. Or he could step on the hero's footprints, bring a napkin, a knife, and a fork, and enjoy the visual feast in a safe place. In short, tonight was definitely not a good time after what had just happened. He set up the experiment table and began tonight's experiment in advance. One trash slime card was enough. He didn't try the plant species grass attribute. Instead, he followed the bird and beast species grass attribute basic alchemy method for the second and third experiments. In the end, the two experiments ended in failure. But then he changed his way of thinking. He used the basic alchemy method described in the textbook, which was the so-called random alchemy method. The difficulty of the random alchemy method was relatively low, and the production rate was also relatively low. But when the mages couldn't find a direction, they would often use this method to find an idea. Experiments didn't only have to succeed to obtain data. Experiments that failed could also give people inspiration. It was still fairy honey and brain lobe essence. But the following materials were completely different. The random alchemy method felt like putting a large pile of materials into a large pot and cooking them all together. In the middle, a few special alchemy arrays were mixed in, and the leftovers after the cooking were all refined into the magic card. Because only the nature and requirements of some of the materials were specified and not precisely specified, and the requirements for quantity and time were also quite lax, a large number of random elements were included from the beginning of the refining. So, even if the same person used the same materials to make the magic card, it could be completely different. This was the random alchemy method, exclusive to the European king. After spending 32 minutes, Dake finally advanced to the final step of refining the magic fairy card. After he activated the number 1 refining array, he began to add things into it. First it was cat hair, then cat hair. Finally, it was still cat hair. In order to ensure the purity of the core material, Dake didn't add any other materials other than cat hair. When the last cat hair was absorbed and swallowed, the light of the number 1 refining array slowly faded, and finally returned to normal. Dake looked at the magic card on the table carefully. There was a thick layer of black glue on the card surface, giving off a kind of smell that was a little similar to a burnt smell. He picked up the magic pen and tapped lightly. Boom! A part of the glue suddenly exploded. A trace of flame sprang up, and then immediately spread out. Dake's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He grabbed the fireproof cloth at the corner of the table and covered it. Bam bam! The fire was extinguished. Lifting the fireproof cloth and removing the glue, Dake used a pair of tweezers to clamp a corner of the magic card, and carefully pulled it out. However, the surface of the magic card was pitch black. It was obviously a failure. Although it failed, I can see that it is of the fire attribute. But why is the fur of the cat grass of the fire attribute? Could it be the power of the sun? Pride the sun. I see. There's a problem here. Dake suddenly understood. In his previous experiments, he had been using the basic refining method of the grass attribute. In fact, the light attribute that symbolized the sun was the most suitable for pride. After the cat grass absorbed pride, its attribute was already of the light attribute. Using cat hair to refine, he should use the 2 basic refining methods of plant species, light attribute, or bird species, light attribute. Yesterday's data, asterisk asterisk asterisk, asterisk asterisk asterisk. Chapter 66. The sky was getting dark, and the moon was rising from the west. Dake paused for a while to suck on the cat's fur, and then finished the dinner brought by the little devil beast. Only then did he begin the second round of experiment. This time, he first used the basic refining method of plant species, light attribute to refine it. The result was not ideal. With the experience of making trash slime, he thought that the classification of plant species should be correct. But that did not seem to be the case. Perhaps the reason why trash slime could be refined was because his nails were the real core material. On the contrary, using the basic refining method of bird and beast species, light attribute, to refine it was unusually smooth. It was just that in the final step of filling in the core material, the cat's fur was obviously insufficient. No matter how many strands of cat's fur were thrown into the number 1 refining array, the light of the refining array was still dim. This phenomenon was written in the textbook. It was caused by the insufficient quality of the core material. First website, https://m, vipcanshu. VIP Dake immediately realized that bird and beast species, light attribute, should be the correct way to refine it. But only a little bit of pride. Fur was not enough to support the completion of this magic card. It needed a higher quality core material. In other words, it was the fruit that was bred from the cat grass and pride. I finally confirmed the usage of the fruit. Dake was overjoyed. There was a lot of cat's fur, but there was only one fruit. All the previous failures were to welcome the final success. He picked up a pen and wrote in his notebook, bird and beast species light attribute fruit pride. The experiment had come to an end. Now he only needed to wait for the beginning of next month. Dake placed a deck chair on the balcony, hugged the cat grass, and started reading the outfit changer. as an entertainment book. He was actually not interested in the outfit changer card. But that was why he could read it without restraint. The opening of the outfit changer introduced the simple method of making the outfit changer card. And then it was all kinds of weird clothing designs. Dake even saw a set of clothing with an S embroidered on the front, an AB embroidered on the back. In short, it was quite interesting. Time gradually passed. The moonlight was getting brighter. When Dake almost fell asleep, a purple butterfly with a long tail made of fluorescent light flew lightly across his field of vision. After a few seconds of delay, Dake suddenly became alert and straightened his body. Meow! The catnip grass let out a cry. Dake's eyes widened as he watched the pink and purple butterflies fly out of the room. Their long tails formed a bright galaxy, with a hint of mystery and beauty. What happened? Dake scooped up the catnip plant and placed it on the recliner. He then quickly walked into the room and took out the butterfly orchid card from the card bag on the desk. Without any infusion of magic, the flower card activated on its own. Butterflies flew out of the card and danced around it. Dake looked up at the clock on the wall, 9:43. Under normal circumstances, he should already be preparing for his bedtime work. However, because he had invested too much energy into the experiment today, he ended up reading too many books. However, it wouldn't affect him much. Instead, because he had taken a short nap, he was now full of energy. He frowned and finally put on the school uniform jacket that was hanging on the hanger. He checked the card and put on the card bag. In fact, the origin of the flower card was related to the reduction of bliss. It was extremely important to him. I feel like if I don't do something, the melon will be cold. From Professor Kazayer's actions, it's obvious that he actually wants me to continue investigating. But he doesn't seem to want to do it himself. He's in a rather contradictory state of mind. Is there a reason why he can't make a choice? Should I trust him? Dake quickly walked to the door. However, when he opened the door, he suddenly thought of something. He turned back and took out the night dress mask from the drawer and put it in the card bag. Unknowingly, I already have 9 cards. It was almost 10 o'clock, and the common room of the aristocrat courtyard was empty. Dake walked down the stairs, and the magic lamp hanging on the wall automatically lit up. He didn't stay in the common room for long. Instead, he pushed the door open and went out. The golem guarding the tower was coiled up with its eyes closed. It didn't react at all. Dake quickly walked across the bridge and entered the castle. The Shungmalian castle was well connected, and there were golems patrolling every night. However, before midnight, the golems would only activate the warning function. After midnight, they would enter the guard mode. Once they found a student, they would arrest them. Therefore, midnight every day was the lockdown time for the entire castle. Dake took out the school card and summoned the little fiend beast. The little fiend beast sensed Dake's thoughts and couldn't help but reveal a trace of excitement. The boring school life had been suppressing its nature. It was a little fiend beast that was destined to stand above the sky in the future. The night was its domain. Above the night sky, there was its throne. Come here. Woo-woo. Dake looked at the little fiend beast with a dark expression and said helplessly, "Do you still remember the path when we followed White? Take me there." The little fiend beast immediately regained its calm and quickly patted its face. "Of course I remember. Who am I?" Dake smiled. "Then hurry up." The night was indeed a good environment. He always felt that the emotions that had been suppressed until now seemed to have found an outlet, and were flowing out little by little. He waved his hand, and the butterflies followed his guidance and formed a ribbon. Professor Kazayer said that this flower card would lead him to the source, but in fact, they were just flying around the card aimlessly. Dake guessed that it was because of the distance. Fortunately, he had followed White for a while before and could get closer. Therefore, he quickly moved with the little fiend beast. First, he came to the window sill of the Plenilune Serpent, then went to the next floor, passed through the external bridge, and entered another area of the castle. While paying attention to avoiding the golems, he continued to move forward. After about 10 minutes, Dake finally found the statue of the Grand Magus that he used to hide last time. It was also here that the butterflies suddenly reacted and flew in a specific direction. Here it comes. Dake realized that he was in range. Last time, the little fiendish magical beast had lost Victor not far in front of him. Thinking that this was a game world derived from Harry Potter, it was impossible for there not to be a secret passage in the castle. White must have used the secret passage to avoid being tracked by the little fiend beast. Dake followed all the way until the butterflies stuck to a wall and stopped flying. He realized that his destination should be somewhere within the wall. In this direction? Dake narrowed his eyes and quickly explored the wall. As a trace of magic power was injected, his fingers suddenly sank into the wall. After a moment of fright, Dake immediately commanded the little fiend beast to take the lead and dive in. But the butterflies swarmed in before the little fiend beast. Suddenly, there was the sound of footsteps behind his ears. Dake's expression changed slightly. He grabbed the little fiend beast and pressed it into the wall, and then he went in as well. Heartsuit Friday between 10 and 11 a.m. Looking for monthly tickets and subscriptions. Heartsuit also attached is a math problem. Bird beast type light attribute strength plus cat grass fruit pride equals. Chapter 67. Did I hear it wrong? 10 seconds later, Professor Shi-Erfu appeared in the corridor and looked at the surrounding walls hesitantly. Then Professor Didi also flew over and said, "Why don't we go over there and take a look? I feel that something is wrong. Kids these days are getting more and more difficult to deal with." Professor Shi-Erfu nodded and said, "Times have changed. We didn't even have time to study back then. How could we have time for night trips?" They were only separated by a wall. Dake calmed himself down and waited for Professor Shi-Erfu and Professor Didi to leave. Only then did he let go of the little fiend in his hand. The little fiend was pressed down by him and couldn't breathe for a long time. At this time, it quickly took a deep breath as if it had come back to life. The free air is so good. Dake's face darkened. "You're just a familiar. Do you have to be like this?" The little fiend lowered its head and muttered, "So what if I'm a familiar? Do I not have the right to breathe?" Dake didn't bother with it. "Go explore the way." "All right." The little fiend immediately lowered its head and flew forward. Dake took out his magic pen and drew as he walked, leaving his magic mark on the wall. The butterfly formed by the card obviously didn't have intelligence and didn't know how to choose a path. It could only be used as a pointer. If it blindly followed it, it would only run into the wall. Dake was glad that he had brought a shoulder bag with him when he went out. The necessary tools were in it. It was just that his spatial imagination wasn't enough to draw a map out of thin air. The torches on both sides of the secret passage lit up continuously, gradually illuminating the path ahead. Dake walked forward. Whenever he took a turn, he would turn back and turn into another fork. Over and over again, he walked in the maze-like secret passage for more than half an hour. Inevitably, his senses were gradually confused and he couldn't distinguish between north, south, east, and west. Just as he was feeling vaguely irritated, a voice suddenly came from the other side of the wall. "Squid, didn't you go overboard last night?" "No way. Pufferfish. If you can't even accept this, it's better for you to leave the church as soon as possible. I know this is just a rehearsal, but no buts. Look at your fat chin and soft belly. No one said, but to you when you were born." "Squid, you've gone too far. I'm just stating facts." "Fine, I can't out-talk you. What should we do next?" "Hide well. Don't let the professors find you." As the voices gradually faded away, Dake whispered, "How cautious." They actually called each other by the name of seafood. It seems that it was Mr. Squid who turned Luoboat into a woman last night. After that, he rested for a while on the spot before continuing to move forward while sticking close to the wall. Finally, he found the route to the other side of the wall. According to the direction that the squid and pufferfish had left in, Dake was on the right path. From the reactions of the butterflies, he could tell that the final destination was not far away. Therefore, he slowed down his pace. No one knew how many people there were in the so-called church. If there were still people inside, he needed to be mentally prepared to make a move at any time. But he seemed to be quite lucky. Until he entered the small temple, he did not encounter anyone. No one. Dake immediately turned around and retreated. He leaned against the wall and looked inside. but the butterflies that were becoming more and more active flew inside uncontrollably. He cursed in his heart. Then he saw that behind the statue in the temple, the reflection that had just appeared shook and shrank back. This reaction? Dake was instantly amused. The person hiding behind seemed to be worried about being discovered. This made Dake immediately realize that it was also an intruder. Should I tease it a little? This thought flashed through his mind. Of course, he did not really do that. The main reason was that the butterflies had already flown to the surroundings of the statue. They landed and flew up from various parts of the statue, as if they were collecting honey. The statue, as delicate as white jade, emitted a soft white light. Every time the butterflies landed, they would pick up a spot of light. But the spots of light did not last long. They turned into stardust in the air and melted into the air. The person hiding behind the statue was clearly affected by the butterflies. He could faintly hear some rustling sounds. It seemed that he could not help but drive away the approaching butterflies. Dake had some guesses in his heart. He took out the night mask from his card bag. Magic summoning. A faint light flashed. The school uniform he was wearing had been replaced with that cheap formal attire. Black suit, top hat, white glasses, crimson cloak, white gloves, and a blood-red rose. Excluding the cheap feeling of the suit's material, it could be considered a standard gentleman's suit. But Dake touched his cheeks. He felt that it was too much to call himself a mask, just by wearing a pair of glasses. But for the time being, he could not find anything to cover his face with. At the same time, the person hiding behind the statue might have been annoyed by the butterflies. Or maybe he realized that Dake was also an intruder. Of course, it was also possible that he felt that he had been discovered. Anyways, his movements of driving away the butterflies suddenly became louder. Following that, an abnormally strong light suddenly lit up behind the statue. All the butterflies that were flying around the statue were annihilated without exception. Crack! Dake took out the butterfly orchid card and found that there was a fatal crack in the center of the flower card. I didn't expect that the professor didn't lie to me. This is really just a small toy. Dake found that he had finally found the truth in the professor's words. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. If it was a regular magic elf card, it would not be destroyed directly because of the destruction of the magic elf. Stop hiding. Come out. White Gouda walked out from behind the statue, followed by a majestic stag. Dake took a glance and almost burst out laughing. Victor had also used a disguise card, and it was a full-body Cayman rider suit. It was Lion's self-made crude Beelzebub's fly suit. He wondered if it was a pyramid scheme. In short, White in the fly suit looked like a large fly with a big compound eye mask on his face. However, if one were to disregard the appearance and just look at the function of concealing one's identity, this fly suit would be much more useful than Dark's evening dress mask. But why did you summon the iconic white stag when you had changed your outfit? No, I can't laugh anymore. I must learn from this and never make the same mistake as him. Dark started running without a second thought. He only left a coquettish back to the hero's son, who had finally mustered up his courage. But the hero's son seemed to have been frustrated for too long. Seeing that someone was running away without a fight, he actually chased after him. Chapter 68. Hey, do you think I'll let you catch me? The difference in strength between the two sides was evident as early as when they were running laps. Dake didn't panic at all as he ran in front. From time to time, he would turn a corner and sneak a glance at the gradually panting White. But White wasn't stupid. Seeing the difference in leg strength, he finally remembered his stag. A moment later, White climbed onto the stag's back, enduring the load between his legs as the stag ran. His sharp eyes pierced through the fly's compound eyes, as if he wanted to ruthlessly pierce the back of the person in front of him. But Dake, who was running in front, flashed again and disappeared at the turn. From the moment White climbed onto the stag, Dake knew that the race was over. The magic elf's existence for a long time required continuous magic power consumption. But the magic talent of the hero's son was enough to support him for an entire night. 1 second to remember. https://m VIP Canshu. VIP. Just by relying on the turn, he might be able to temporarily increase the distance. but it would be very difficult to shake him off. Since that was the case, he would counterattack. At the 8th second, the trash slime appeared in his hand. After another turn, Ivan began to run in front of him. At the next turn, the pride emblem appeared on Ivan's forehead. It suddenly sped up and disappeared in front of him like a flash of lightning. And White Gouda finally saw Dake's back again. He continued to pour his magic power into the stag's body, and a flower card appeared in his hand. Forbidden love. The distance between the two sides quickly closed. Just as White's lips curled up slightly, thinking that he was about to catch up, the person in front of him suddenly took off his tall hat and threw it back. The pitch-black hat spun in the air and quickly crashed into him due to the stag's high speed. White didn't have time to react, but the stag suddenly stopped and turned right, helping him narrowly avoid the oncoming hat. But then, a puddle of green mucus-like substance appeared from behind the top hat and slapped his face. The moment his vision was blocked, White's heart was suddenly filled with fear. However, everything happened so suddenly. He only vaguely saw a petite shadow flash through the air, and then the stag that he was so proud of screamed, and was instantly destroyed without any resistance. Then the green mucus on his face suddenly disappeared. He fell from the sky. Fortunately, the stag had already stopped when he was hit in the face. Otherwise, under the inertia, he would have been half dead from the fall. Around the corner, Dake waved his hand, and the two glowing shadows drilled back into the magic card between his fingers. It was a simple encounter. He shouldn't have been exposed, right? He cast a glance at the hero child, whose butt had almost cracked from the fall. Dake came out from another fork in the road. With White on his back, he picked up the black top hat on the ground and blew on it. When the dust was gone, he gracefully put it back on. Then he ignored White and quickly went back to the small temple. Since the seafood of the church had left, and White had been eliminated as an unstable factor, if he didn't take this opportunity to study the temple, wouldn't it be a waste of Professor Ka-Zayer's gift? Dake wasn't interested in the purpose of the church. He came purely for the origin of the flower cards. Now the situation was very obvious. The statue of the goddess in the temple was the origin of the flower cards. As Dake stepped in, the extinguished torches lit up again and illuminated every corner of the temple. Dake summoned the little devil beast and let it fly around the temple to make sure that no one was hiding. He walked to the front of the statue and carefully observed the statue of the goddess that gave people the initial impression of holiness. It clasped its hands in front of its chest, closed its eyes, and nodded slightly, like a pure girl praying in a church. Its body emitted a soft halo that made people feel very comfortable. Dake wasn't simply attracted to the statue like White. He carefully observed for a moment and preliminarily judged that it should be a goddess. The power of the flower cards originates from here. Is the reason why the bliss was reduced because it was purified by the holy power? In order to verify his guess, Dake took out Bliss Eye. But the moment he injected a trace of magic, Bliss Eye, and the statue exploded with an extremely strong light at the same time. Dake suddenly closed his eyes, and a Bliss +1 quickly floated in his dark vision. This made him instantly alert, and he immediately stopped injecting magic into Bliss Eye. Damn, it's the same power. Dake's face changed as he suddenly realized. Under the holy appearance of the statue, there was a sin of bliss that was even stronger than his current state. It turned out that the reason why bliss could be reduced by the flower cards was not because it was purified, but because it was absorbed. At this moment, with Bliss Eye as a medium, the bliss accumulated in the statue was actually flowing backward into his body. This was like water flowing downwards. It had to reach a balance before it could stop. Fortunately, Bliss Eye was only Bliss Eye. It was too small and weak as a transmission channel for energy, so it was only Bliss +1 at the moment. It was just that the channel was already connected. Even if the magic input was cut off, it couldn't be closed. At the critical moment, Dake took out Pride Eye. 6 seconds later, the little devil beast's eyes changed. Dake threw Bliss Eye into the sky without hesitation. The little devil beast that had been unhappy with this magic card for a long time immediately flapped its wings and shot 3 shark-headed syringes at the pink card in a triangular formation, shooting it into pieces. Ha 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 ha. The little devil beast's wild laughter echoed in the temple. I'm a little devil beast, born noble. How dare you, a mere magic card, provoke me? If you provoke me again in the future, you'll end up like this. Oh hee hee hee. Phew. With the shattering of Bliss Eye, the connection between Dake and the statue was finally broken. He breathed a sigh of relief, but his gaze towards the statue became more and more solemn. How could there be such a thing in the Shungmalian secret chamber? Professor Kazair might know about it. What is he thinking? It can't be that you want me to destroy this thing, right? Who is the goddess that this statue symbolizes? One question after another kept popping up. Dake turned Pride Eye in his hand and fell into a short contemplation. Then, a very normal thought naturally appeared in his mind. Can I use this goddess statue to create a higher level bliss series? Chapter 69. There were so many extreme bliss stored in the statue. If he could draw them all out, not to mention Extreme Bliss I and Extreme Bliss II, even Extreme Bliss 3, and Extreme Bliss V were highly possible. The only problem was that it seemed to lack a bit of flavor. Dake had a preliminary understanding of the bliss contained in the statue through the connection just now. He felt like it was missing something, but he couldn't put his finger on it. It could be a difference in quality, or it could be that something was missing. In short, it was slightly different from Dake's own bliss. This might be the reason why the bliss of the statue could be used to make flower cards. I still don't have enough knowledge. Dake couldn't help but sigh. Learning wasn't something that could be done overnight. Knowledge needed time to accumulate. He couldn't rush it. Website. https://m. Vip can't you? Vievi tomorrow. I'll come again tomorrow night. After making up his mind, Dake didn't stay in the temple for too long. He felt like he still needed to find Professor Kazair to borrow the thinking bottle. It was much faster to come out of the secret passage than to go in. The main thing was that Dake found White, who was limping while covering his butt, and followed him to take a shortcut. When they came out of the secret passage, it was close to midnight. Dake quickly parted ways with White, and returned to the aristocrat's tower before the curfew. All in all, this night trip was quite smooth. Even though he lost a flower card and a bliss eye, there were more bliss series waiting for him. Therefore, Dark was able to sleep quite well. In contrast, White didn't sleep well. He finally made it back to the dormitory before the Knights Academy's tower was locked. His butt cracked further because he forced himself to run. It was one disaster after another. But when he thought of the gentleman in the black suit he encountered in the secret passage, this pain was nothing. He didn't look like someone from the church. He probably entered for other reasons like me. Damn it, who is it? I wanted to catch him and interrogate him. Hiss. So White slept on his stomach the whole night. A warm breeze blew through the door. As the sunlight shone in, the cat grass, which was especially sensitive to sunlight, opened its eyes before Dake did. When Dake woke up, he realized that his face was wet. He reluctantly put the catnip plant back into the basket on the bedside table, and got up to wash up. You're in good spirits. Dake looked at himself in the mirror and summoned trash slime to apply on his face. Instantly he felt refreshed. Today's Great Sage Daily had a different wind blowing over it. Dake was sitting alone in the common room, reading the newspaper. The banner of the newspaper was highlighted by colored pages, and there was a picture of the 3 princesses. The eldest princess was gentle and virtuous, while the twin princesses were adorable. The Sage Daily announced the 3 princesses' itinerary for Halloween. They would participate in the Shungmalian Academy's Halloween ball as representatives of the royal family. In a political sense, this was a very obvious gesture of goodwill. Since the headmaster of Erdii had agreed, it could be said that he had made his stance clear. On the bottom page of the newspaper, there was also a picture of the eldest prince. The eldest prince would go to the Academy of the Holy Church on Halloween to participate in the Halloween ceremony. Have the 2 sides already declared their stance so clearly? Dake frowned slightly. He didn't want to see a war or internal strife. But humans had been such creatures since ancient times. As long as they were alive, they would never stop fighting. Slurp, Dake sipped his black tea and put down the newspaper. He was a firm dove, but he didn't dislike some of the decisions of the Hawk faction. But since the Valkyrie was the leader of the Dove faction, then of course, he would stand firmly behind her. But he was only 12 years old. In the next 6 years, he would spend most of his time in the Shungmalian Academy. What happened outside had little to do with him. Instead of worrying about that, it was better to think about how much of a stir the three princesses would cause at the Halloween ball. Elisha, Anna, and Enchi? I don't remember them being on good terms with me. Well, that's good. The first class on Wednesday was potions. Dake arrived at the classroom early and watched as White entered from the back door with the help of Luoboat. This kid, his butt is about to split open. Why didn't he go to the infirmary? Sister Ka Lien would be happy to give his butt a painkiller, right? Dake turned his face away and smiled a little heartlessly. White and Luoboat were injured one day apart. They even walked with a bitter face. Ouch! White sat down carefully, but he still clenched his teeth in pain. Luoboat said helplessly, "Bear with it. It's your fault for accidentally falling and not wanting to go to the infirmary. Sister Ka Lien is a good person. She's not as scary as the rumors say." "Don't," White hurriedly said. "It's just a fall. It won't hurt anymore after I get used to it." When class started, Professor Thompson called him to the podium when he saw that he was still grimacing in pain. White endured the pain and completed his mission. When he walked down, his face was green. The second class was summoning. Professor Shi Erfu brought a type of summoning card for practice. It could respond to summoning spells and could be used to practice sacrificial summoning. The little mages excitedly chanted summoning spells and summoned one big ball of light after another. Before class ended, Professor Shi Erfu told the students that they could buy a set of summoning cards from her for 100 credits. However, in the end, less than a third of the students bought them. Of course, Dake bought them. His credits increased at a rate visible to the naked eye. Whether it was helping Luoboat or the multiplication table, they all gave him a lot of credits. The most important thing was that the summoning cards were really useful. He found that he could shorten his normal summoning spells to less than 6 seconds. Although he had just started learning sacrificial summoning, he learned it quickly. Last night's battle with White made him realize the importance of summoning. Every second counted in a battle between mages. Only by reducing the casting time and cooldown of summoning to the limit could one not be at a disadvantage. After class, Dake took a deep breath and went to Professor Ka Zainer's office again. He did not mention what happened last night. Instead, he borrowed a thinking bottle from the professor. When the professor casually asked him about it, he smiled and said that he had made progress in his experiment, and that the thinking bottle was more convenient. Professor Ka Zainer gave him a few words of encouragement, and went back to marking his homework. The two of them did not talk about the flower cards again. After leaving the office, Dake went to the cafeteria to eat. Then he went back to his dorm, and took the magic brain dropper and various instruments to the secret passage. In the daytime. Chapter 70. There was a question that had been lingering in Dake's mind. Why did he have to choose to enter the secret passage at night? Was it not good during the day? There were clearly many benefits during the day. 1. There were no golems patrolling. 2. The professors were all busy. 3. It was bright. There were no classes on Wednesday afternoon. Dake took a slight detour and entered the secret passage without anyone noticing. Then, following the route he took last night, he found the location of the temple in just over 10 minutes. As expected, he remembered the website, VIP Kanshu. VIP. There was no one in the temple. Whether it was that inexplicable church or White with a blossoming, but they did not understand the benefits of the day. Dark had the little fiend magical beast stand guard outside, while he summoned little Ivan and began to harvest the bliss. The most important part of this step was how to draw out bliss. It might be difficult for others, but for Dake, just by injecting a little magic power, he could draw out the bliss accumulated in the goddess statue. Then he could use the magic brain dropper to draw out a tube's worth. It was too easy. It was so easy that Dake almost thought he was dreaming. The thinking bottle borrowed from the professor could store a full 30 drops. Dake quickly filled up the thinking bottle and finally sucked a drop into the magic brain dropper before he left the small temple. But he didn't notice. After he left, fine cracks slowly crawled on the goddess statue's white jade-like skin. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Dake had already returned to the dormitory. He spread out the experimental equipment, placed the thinking bottle in the upper left corner, and placed the magic brain dropper on the shelf with the tip of his mouth facing up. Then he washed his hands and couldn't wait to start the experiment. He already had some experience in the making of the Big Sin series of magic cards. Basically, he was making it according to the precision-making method of the emotion card. First he boiled the brain juice, and then made the sealing fluid. Then he took a blank magic card and spread it on the experiment table. Then he spread the egg white brain juice evenly on the blank magic card to change the surface properties of the magic card, so that emotions and other thoughts could be more easily attached to it. And then, Dake took the magical brain pipette and pressed the tip of the magical brain pipette against the blank magic card, squeezing the magical brain with all his might. The drop of bliss stored in the demon brain was spat out. The effect of the brain juice came into play. Bliss was like a drop of paint on a piece of white paper, instantly dyeing it red. Different from pride, a dark gold color, bliss, color was an ambiguous pink, but it was very light. The experiment ended here. Dake finally discovered the problem. That's not right. I remember when I was making the pride magic card. A single drop of pride was enough to turn the blank magic card into a rich dark gold color. Could it be that one drop is not enough because of the quality? With a hint of doubt, Dake extracted a drop of bliss from the thinking bottle and dripped it onto the card again. The pink color on the card had finally deepened a little, but it still couldn't compare to the Bliss Eye card that had been modified from a flower card. It wasn't until the third drop of bliss that the color of the card became very similar to Bliss Eye. Dake recorded this phenomenon and began to apply the sealing liquid. After more than 10 minutes, a Bliss series of magic cards was finally completed. Dake held the card and observed it carefully for a while. Perhaps it was because of the experiment process, but he always felt that this thing wasn't very reliable. Let's give it a try first. Then, he turned his gaze to the little devil beast that was pretending to be asleep on the bird rack. The experiment showed that the effect of this magic card was still there. Although the duration was slightly inferior to that flower card, the degree of emotional impact was not much different. Then he did a simple calculation problem. A Bliss Eye card used 3 drops of bliss. Wouldn't Bliss 2 need 9 drops? What about Bliss 3? 30 drops. Considering that if he continued to make Bliss 2, it was very likely that the Bliss 3 needed for Bliss 3 would not be enough. Dake made a decision. He skipped Bliss 2 and tried to make Bliss 3. There are 28 drops left. Hope it's enough. At this point, Dake didn't have much hope for the bliss produced by the goddess statue. He only hoped that this experiment could provide experience for the subsequent Pride 3. However, he still took out one of the 250 credit blank magic cards and began to make it carefully. The steps of making it were roughly the same as before. However, when he injected bliss, he used a total of 28 drops of bliss. That's right, he injected all the remaining bliss he had. In the end, this 50 credit blank magic card was dyed a flirtatious golden pink from the inside out. It had a strong frivolous aura. He maintained his composure and continued to make it. He applied the sealing liquid and drew the alchemy circle. A total of 7 alchemy circles were completed in one go. When the last alchemy circle was successfully triggered, even Dake himself felt that it was unbelievable. This Bliss 3 seemed to have been made just like that. Just from the outside, this Bliss 3 didn't seem to be much different from Bliss Eye. It was just that the color gave people a more enchanting feeling, and there was a strong but not greasy fragrance. However, nothing could be evaluated just from the outside. If he wanted to know what was inside, he could only experiment. Dake couldn't help but look at the little fiend beast again. No way, sir. Again. The little fiend beast that had just recovered from its bliss state suddenly felt like it had fallen into an abyss. Meow meow meow. The cat leaned on the balcony window and peeked in. The little fiend beast thought that this cute cry was a malicious taunt. It stretched out its claws and lay down like a corpse. Come on. I'm yours. Life was like being targeted by a crazy woman. Since it couldn't resist, it had to learn to enjoy it. The little devil beast had been with Dark for so long, and it could be said that it had learned this famous saying. Dake shook his head helplessly. The little fiend beast was indeed a little pitiful. All this time, he was really sorry. However, the experiments still had to be done. Who asked you to be the most resistant to a type of plant? Dake took a deep breath and held the Bliss 3 magic card with his index and middle fingers. He swiped it lightly in front of him and activated the summoning spell. In the name of Dake Dimung, magic summoning. In an instant, an extremely strong pink light burst out from the Bliss 3 magic card. Almost the entire dormitory was illuminated in the girl's color. Other than the caster who was not affected, the cat grass outside the window was meowing softly. As for the little fiend beast that was directly exposed to the strong light. Chapter 71. The little demon beast lying on the bed suddenly let out an extremely shrill scream. It was as if the pink light turned into countless sharp blades, piercing its body over and over again. But this kind of acting could no longer fool Dake. He watched as the light gathered between the little demon beast's eyebrows, and the skull pattern on its forehead was replaced by a new Great Sin emblem. The pink light released from Bliss 3 was completely absorbed and then exploded. With the emblem as the core, its entire body turned into light and finally formed a pink light body. Then the life structure of the light body unbelievably underwent a drastic change. It was like a tadpole transforming into a toad, or a marine creature transforming into a land creature. It was a transition of life form, a great evolution of species. Dake almost immediately realized that this was evolution. The little demon beast, under the effect of Bliss 3, actually evolved. Bliss 3 was like a huge data card for the digitalized beast, which was supposed to be a life form of data. 1 second to remember. https://m, VIP can't you? VIP endless ecstasy filled his heart. Dake looked at the +1 notification floating in front of his eyes, but he didn't care at all. He only desired this form, and was sincerely excited about the little demon beast's evolution. What could it be? Demon beast? Evil dragon? Evil ice beast? There were too many evolution paths for digitalized beasts, especially digitalized beasts like the little demon beast. Its evolution path was designed with a large number of virus-type digitalized beasts. Dake's understanding of this was only on the surface. However, this brought him even more pleasure. Everyone liked evolution, whether it was the demon beast, the evil dragon, or the evil ice beast. They were all powerful and handsome mature digitalized beasts. Although their evil appearance might attract criticism, the magisters who used the dark card set and the demon card set weren't useless. There was nothing to worry about, as long as they pursued the extreme handsomeness. Come out. It's decided to be you. Evil. Black Dirk Beast. He looked at the black cat that was still rolling on the bed. Dake's mouth froze. How should he put it? A Heidi Road beast is not impossible. She had jet black fur, large cat ears, exquisite facial features, a petite and cute body, a meatball wearing claw gloves, and a long slender tail. She looked just like a black-skinned hot girl. She could barely do it. Meow. The Heidi Road beast stopped rolling. As her long eyelashes trembled slightly, her amber yellow cat eyes slowly opened. He was like a newborn baby, looking at the world with curiosity. Then, its gaze focused on Dake at a speed visible to the naked eye. Meow. Master Tidy Tidy. The Heidi Road beast's eyes suddenly turned into the shape of a heart. Its pink tongue licked the corner of its mouth, making its lips moist and elastic. The Great Sin emblem on its forehead constantly released a pink aura as its emotions changed. Dake really wanted to know the difference between Elysium and pride. But the Heidi Road beast pounced over with a meow, and its powerful strength instantly pressed him to the ground. Looking at the Heidi Road beast's eyes, which were filled with a dense, bewitching fog, Dark realized that something was wrong. Get up! The Heidi Road beast did not listen to the order. In the name of Dake Dimung, I order you to stand up, my familiar. The great sin emblem between the Heidi Road beast's eyebrows flashed, as if to counteract the mandatory order from the familiar system. And it stuck out its pink tongue, starting from Dake's chin, and licked his forehead. Is this out of control? Dake's face was full of saliva, and he showed a complicated expression. It was not very obvious when Elysium I was used. It was completely obvious when Elysium 3 was used. The Great Sin series magic card, which originated from Elysium of the Goddess statue, finally showed its biggest drawback. Chaotic evolution, out-of-control digital beasts. It could not help but remind people of the horror when the protagonist Thais subancient beast mistakenly evolved into a Tyrannosaurus in the first Digimon. That's it. Dake finally found his self-control. It seemed that evolving into a Heidi Road beast was really too lucky. If it was a demonic beast or something like that, he would have been torn to pieces by now. Thinking of this, Dake's heart chilled, and his eyes looking at the Heidi Road beast became much gentler. He turned around and hugged it, and skillfully rubbed its chin, ears, chest, belly, and forehead. Anyway, it was just stroking a cat. He was already very skilled. Under the effect of Dake's eagle hand, the overbearing Heidi Road beast suddenly became a creature that was even worse than an ordinary kitten. It was addicted to Elysium and could not extricate itself. Dake's full strength made it sublime in the extreme. As the Heidi Road beast finally stopped moving, Dake communicated with it and quickly recorded in his notebook. Card name: Heidi Road beast. Type: elf card. Level: race: bird beast. Attribute: dark magic 1500. Attack 1900. Defense 900. Killing skills: cat fist, dangerous love. The black fur was impressive. It was a virus-type Heidi Road beast. It was a completely evil woman. It ran and lived in the creepy darkness. The Heidi Road beast was born with a bad personality. It had strong self-esteem and liked to bully the weak. It was a troublesome digital beast. It was basically a dark attribute digital beast that evolved into a fallen angel-type digital beast. Its killing skill was the same as the Heidi Road beast's cat fist. Cat fist: wave its claws and tear the enemy apart. Dangerous love: use dangerous charm to confuse the enemy and control their actions. If it's a magic elf card, it's a blue card with 2 skills, and it's a powerful combination of an attack skill and a control skill. Dangerous love: the description is very similar to White's forbidden love. Next, record the coat of arms. Dake quickly drew the coat of arms of Bliss. Different from Pride, Bliss's coat of arms was green. In the middle of the coat of arms was a strange mark. On top of the mark was an astronomical symbol that represented the moon. The outer circle of the coat of arms was English. Level 666 system. Asmodeus code. Lust below the seal. In the inner circle of the coat of arms, it was written, Caution. Purgatory level 7. After Dake drew the whole coat of arms, he translated it. Outer circle frowny face level 666. System, Asmodeus. Code, Bliss inner circle frowny face warning. Purgatory level 7. Lucifer Asmodeus. I see, these are the names of the 7 sins demon gods. The Bliss demon god is the 7th in Purgatory. Chapter 72. The evolution lasted for about 16 minutes. As the Bliss emblem on the Black Road beast's forehead gradually faded, it degenerated into a small demonic beast in the light. Even though this was within his expectations, Dake was still a little disappointed. After degenerating, the little devil beast woke up in an instant and struggled to escape from Dake's embrace. It flew back to its bird stand and faced Dake with the back of its head. Dake could faintly hear it muttering, "The little devil beast has lost its dignity. The little devil beast wants to die. Where is hell?" Hell was empty. The devil was in the human world. Dake grinned and summoned the trash slime to help him clean up the remnants of the experiment. About an hour and a half later, the CD of Bliss 3 was refreshed. It seemed that other than the drawback of losing control, this Bliss 3 magic card was more complete in other aspects. Of course, the 50-credit blank magic card was also very important. Dake was not in a hurry to carry out the second experiment. Instead, He first finished the takeout brought by the little devil beast before starting the last step of the night. Website. https://mvipcanchu. VIP. The little devil beast's unexpected evolution made him have great expectations for little Ibu. Like the digital beast, the sprite was also a species that could evolve, even though the evolution principle was completely different. Since the bliss emblem had the symbol of the moon, perhaps it was the same as pride, which symbolized the power of the sun, and also had the power of the moon. And a lifelike Ibu could bathe in the moonlight and evolve into Moon Ibu. Magic summoning. Under the little devil beast's gloating gaze, Dake took out Fantasy Beast, Ibu, and summoned Ibu. Ibu? Then. Swipe card. Evolve. Beijing. This time, it had really evolved. Under the illumination of Bliss 3, the Bliss emblem also appeared on Ibu's forehead. Moonlight with a trace of pink mist was released from its forehead, enveloping its petite body. Ibu. Moon Ibu. Different from the original Moon Ibu, this Moon Ibu's pitch-black fur had a pink ring-shaped pattern on it. Black represented the night. Pink represented bliss. It was the agent of the moon that walked in the night, a charming spirit that symbolized bliss. Card name, Moon Ivan. Type, elf card. Race bird. Attribute, evil magic power, 1500 attack, 1600 defense, 1900 ultimate skills, Moonlight, Evil Wave, Shadow Ball. 3 skills. After evolving, Ivan had shockingly become a 4-star orange card. Moreover, it was an extremely rare orange card with a self-recovery skill. As everyone knew, the biggest problem with the Magic Elf card was its lack of endurance. Mana was both the lifeline and the energy source of the Magic Elf. Casting skills consumed mana, and standing still also consumed mana. Without the support of an Archmage, a 1500 mana value 4-star Magic Guide Fairy could only exist for about 30 minutes without being able to use any skills. However, a Magic Guide Fairy without a sure kill skill was equivalent to losing its soul. Therefore, a Magister would usually equip a deck with some rechargeable cards. And a Magic Guide Fairy, with a self-recovery skill, could perfectly solve this problem. Moon Ivan's first skill, Moonlight, was a very powerful recovery skill. Moonlight recovers 1/4 of maximum mana. Under the illumination of Moonlight, it can recover 1/2 of maximum mana in one go, and provide 4 points of mana per second. Apart from that, the area of effect skill, Evil Wave, and the single target skill, Shadow Ball, greatly increased Moon Ivan's versatility. And the most ridiculous thing about it was its full 1900 defense value. Compared to the Black Dirk Beast, which was second to none in terms of attack, Moon Ivan's attack was slightly weaker, but its defense was undoubtedly at the top. Attack could be made up for with skills, but defense was a hard indicator. Compared to the Black Dirk Beast with 1900 attack and 900 defense, Moon Ivan's strength was obvious. But before Dake could rejoice, Moon Ivan threw him to the ground. The Ivan family, which had both cat and fox characteristics, was never stingy with their tongues. But Dake already had experience in dealing with the Black Dirk Beast, and it turned into its own shape in a few moves. Perhaps I should make another, Bliss 3, and enjoy the feeling of having 2 beauties in each hand? This thought suddenly flashed across his mind, but Dake quickly shook his head. The flaw of Bliss 3 was very obvious. The bliss produced by the goddess statue was absolutely different from his own bliss. There was not much research value. The core purpose of Dake's frequent experiments, and the creation of the Great Sin series of magic guide cards, was still to analyze the great sins. The increase in ability was just a side benefit. It was not advisable to put the cart before the horse. As such, there was no need to go to that temple anymore. As for the flower cards, it might be more feasible to collect the finished products. The night turned. Just as Dake Dimming was calming himself down, there were desperate cries coming from the temple. How did this happen? 1 whole month of hard work. More than 10 members of the so-called cult wearing black robes and masks were kneeling in front of the goddess statue, crying hysterically, "Goddess, please forgive us." The goddess statue, that had no reaction to Dake's crazy blasphemy, actually trembled slightly and slowly opened a slit. She was born from the moon and descended on the earth. She was the goddess of the moon, and also the mother goddess of the earth. The night was her eyes, and the day was the time of her sleep. Dake did not know that by choosing the day, he had accidentally avoided a misfortune. After accepting the sacrifice of the cult, the goddess statue opened a slit. Her eyes were flowing with gentleness like water, but there was a layer of mist covering it, making it sacred and awe-inspiring, and not to be looked at directly. It was just that there was a hideous crack on her delicate cheek, destroying her perfect temperament. The members of the cult prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling all over. But no one noticed that the eyes of the goddess statue had quietly opened a slit. The cult had been established for almost a year, but this was the first time that such a mistake had been made. No one knew why the goddess statue, which was about to be repaired, cracked again. When everyone was kneeling and praying, the light pink mist seeped out from the goddess statue into their bodies, increasing some of their thoughts and making them lose their minds. The goddess' voice rang in their ears. It was a little hazy, but more mysterious. The leader of the cult seemed to have felt the goddess' forgiveness. He kowtowed and cried bitterly, "The great goddess of the moon, please continue to guide us forward. The path illuminated by the moonlight is the path that we crawl on. For the goddess." Chapter 73. White Gouda was very glad that he had come late, because of the pain in his butt. He had thought that these members of the church would not come again tonight after the gathering last night. So he wanted to come and see if the statue had been desecrated by the perverted gentleman last night. He did not expect that not only did the members of the church come, but also so many of them. Their posture of prostrating on the ground was so humble that it set off the nobility of the goddess even more. It was not the first time that White had seen their gathering. He only felt that he was different from them. It was a difference in sequence. This gave him a sense of uniqueness. But now was not the time to stay. From his point of view, he could not see the eyes of the goddess, but only felt that the statue was more sacred. He quietly retreated. Remember the URL, MVIP, can't you? 6. Although the cracks on the statue had increased, there were tinkers to repair them. He did not need to worry. It was just that he had to avoid this point in the future. The Shung Malian life between classes was still boring with a hint of fun. The news that the princesses of the kingdom were going to attend the masquerade ball spread like wildfire, setting off a great wave of excitement in this dull life. The students began to discuss excitedly. It was not just the first-year students. It was the whole castle that was boiling. The eldest princess, Chi, was the most powerful competitor for the throne, like the prince. She was widely loved both in terms of appearance and virtue. It was no exaggeration. More than half of the boys in the castle were admirers of her. Of course, adoration and love were different words. The scheduled participation of the princesses directly raised the level of the masquerade ball on Christmas Eve. The students, who originally only regarded it as an annual event, gradually had different ideas. The boys would want to dress more formally and be more handsome. The girls wanted to make themselves more beautiful, preferably to compete with the princesses. The masquerade ball was a special event. Even civilians could wear princesses' dresses without being blamed. Everyone wanted to be a princess. What's more, there would be a real princess present. Childish. Ai Ma complained in a low voice while carefully choosing a cute hair clip. It was said that the beauty shop opened by the elves had a plant essence that could temporarily straighten hair. She did not hate her fluffy curls, but sometimes she wanted to try another style. It was Friday in the second week of October. The little mages had more credits to spare, and at the same time, they had the title of core material for preparing magical elven cards. Therefore, Traveler Street was unusually lively this weekend. First-year students could be seen everywhere. White's butt finally stopped hurting. He and Luo Boat strolled around the 10 school branch, hoping to find some cheap and special materials. White was deducted 50 points for using Forbidden Love on the back of Professor Kazayer's head. Although Luo Boat was the victim, he was also deducted 10 points because of his night out. He kept complaining that Professor Shi Erfu was really boring, and that Sister Kalien was better. At the same time, Dake also came to Traveler Street. He added some things that Catgrass liked, and thought about what materials he would use to make the magic elven card for Monday's magician class. He was tired of the catnip's fur and wanted to try something new. For example, a combination of rat fur and thunderstruck wood. He heard that there was a type of magical elven called lightning rat. Although it was only 2 stars, it was extremely fast and was most suitable for dodging attacks by holding onto a magic ball in a duel. For a little mage who still couldn't use magic to control a magic-conducting ball from a distance, this was a magic-conducting fairy with a rather high cost-performance ratio. In addition, the combination of color-changing shrimps and transparent mushrooms wasn't bad either. It was said that there was a good chance of making a magical elven with invisibility. This kind of visual suppression was undoubtedly what little mages, who didn't have the corresponding methods, were most afraid of. As the number of magical elven cards increased, it was very likely that there would be first-year students who would be qualified to join the duel club before Christmas. Participating in duels was the proper way to earn more credits. Dake was already preparing for this. He hoped to have at least one second-tier, 4 to 6 stars, magical elven card before then. Although using Nirvana 3 could help Ivan evolve into a 4-star Moon Ivan, its disobedience was too fatal. It couldn't be used in a proper duel. Sure enough, even the goddess, Sim, wasn't as good as his. Dake stepped into a material store. This material store was called Wind Traveler, and it was the most popular store among the lower-year students on Traveler Street. The first and second-year students didn't have enough credits, so they needed this kind of store. Dake looked at the dried lizards, dried rats, dried centipedes, dried scorpions. He felt that there was finally a bit of a wizard in this place. Some of these normal materials only cost a few credits, and the most expensive ones didn't exceed 100 credits. He thought for a bit and finally bought a black 100-year turtle shell, as well as some shards of magical armor. Whether or not he could use them was another matter, but he would just leave them for now. Since Moon Ivan couldn't fight, he needed a meat shield level magical elven card to form a battle strategy. For example, Luoboat's fantasy beast, Castle, was a pretty good type, if he could get a higher star rating. Then he took a flower card from the Wind Traveler's store owner with a strange expression. It was a bonus for reaching 100 credits. It seemed like the shops on Traveler Street were giving out flower cards again? Even if he didn't know the reason, this was undoubtedly great news. Dake's legs suddenly gained momentum, and his enthusiasm for shopping gradually increased. Candy store, flower store, jewelry store, clothing store. He had already walked half a circle before he knew it. Dake looked at the 8 flower cards in his hand, and couldn't help but be overjoyed. The sun was setting in the west, and the red clouds covered the sky. The streets of Traveler's Street were lit up with colored lights. Dake's footsteps stopped in front of an antique store, and his gaze was firmly attracted to an antique on the stall, unable to look away. He had seen the appearance of that antique in a book when he was looking for a way to restrain the 7 great sins. The iron hook of fate. Legend had it that in an extremely ancient era, there was a god who would cast down a fishing line from the heavens, and on the fishing line hung a hook of fate to fish. The god was the fisherman, and the man was the fish. The man who was caught by the hook would be taken to heaven. Even if the last line of the book said, "When the soul is hooked, it naturally goes to heaven." But Dake still had an impression of this hook. Other than the rust, the hook's appearance was exactly the same as what was recorded in the book. Of course, there were many similar imitations in this kind of antique store, and it was impossible to find one just based on the knowledge he had read in the book. He just felt that this thing, even if it was an imitation, was still very valuable. "Child, what have you taken a fancy to?" An old man with a face full of wrinkles walked out of the dark antique store, looking very kind. Heartsuit, looking for monthly votes, looking for subscriptions. Heartsuit, there will be more updates. Thank you for subscribing. Chapter 74. Dake didn't hide it. In fact, he couldn't hide it. Someone who could open a shop on Traveler's Street couldn't be simple. This old man might look benevolent, but once he left Traveler's Street, he might be a ruthless character. Dake simply pointed at the hook and asked, "Grandpa, this isn't the legendary hook of fate, is it?" The old man stroked his long beard and said with a smile, "It's rare for you to recognize it at such a young age." "That's right, its original form is indeed the hook of fate. Yes, the one that hooks souls." Dake was puzzled. Original form? The old man nodded and picked up the rusty iron hook from the stall, wiping the dust off it. Then he said, "The reason why legends are legends is because they're illusory and unfathomable. If someone really took the real thing, how could it be worthy of the word legend? This hook was just made by people to imitate legends." Dake nodded ignorantly and was a little curious. "Then, Grandpa, can it hook souls too?" The old man glanced at him and suddenly waved the hook forward. Scare. Dake subconsciously shrank his head, but the hook swung over from above. "Remember in 1 second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP." The old man chuckled. "It can't hook, it can't hook. It can only hook away a little distracting thought." Distracting thought? Dake's mind stirred, and he couldn't help but listen carefully. The old man said, "Come, I'll show you. By the way, what's your name?" "Dake." "Dake, what about you?" The old man nodded. "Just call me John Sr." With that, he walked into the dim shop. Dake hesitated for a moment, but still followed. Old John did not light an oil lamp until he was inside. The light kept spreading, illuminating the entire shop. John Sr. took out something that looked like sandpaper from a drawer and waved it in front of Dake. "Gold point paper." Then he rubbed his dotted gold finger on the hook for a while, and the old rust fell off with a clatter. By the time he stopped stroking, the hook of fate had already become brand new. Dake gasped in amazement. "Watch carefully." Old John raised his eyebrows at Dake, then suddenly picked up the hook and poked it into his head. A hook. The front half of the hook turned into a shadow when it came into contact with the skin. Then a transparent bubble was hooked out of his brain. Pa. John Sr. reached out and poked, and the bubble burst. "Empty all distracting thoughts. This feels so good." He actually had a refreshed look on his face. Dake could not help but ask, "It can draw out the thought matter in the brain?" Old John nodded and threw the hook back to the stall. "Old man, there's no guarantee of quality. Besides, you can't use it now. When you're in 5th grade, if this hook is still there, I'll sell it to you." Dake's lips twitched, but in the end, he left the antique shop. In fact, he also knew that any high-level item that touched the brain required extremely strong ability to control. Just like how he only dared to use the safest, dragonfly skimming the water, method even though he had the magic brain dropper in his hand. This imitation of the hook of fate was very similar to the magic brain dropper, but the latter could only be hooked 1 drop at a time, while the former could hook a large lump. That was really too dangerous. It was fine if it was just to hook up distracting thoughts. If he really wanted to hook something deep, he was afraid that his entire brain would be hooked away. 5th grade. Dake couldn't help but think, do I still need it in 5th grade? In the end, Dake replenished a few blank magic cards and materials for experiments, then left Traveler's Street. He still had thoughts about the hook of fate, but only a little. When he walked into the castle, a drop of rain quietly dripped down. It was raining. How lucky. Dake looked back at the rain clouds gradually accumulating in the night sky, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. There were 2 days on the weekend. Dake either stayed in the common lounge or the library. Occasionally he would go to Traveler's Street, mainly to collect flower cards. However, the new flower cards seemed to only be in 1 wave, and the sender seemed to have been emptied. He walked around again, and only got 3 more cards. However, he wasn't discouraged. Since the flower cards had been distributed, then he could just ask the students to collect them when the time came. It was just that the flower cards always felt unstable, and might lose their effectiveness at any time. After all, it wasn't the right way to use external objects. Dake spent most of his time in the library studying theoretical knowledge related to thinking. He found that his knowledge in this area was still too lacking. If he could study it more thoroughly, he might be able to use a more ingenious method to extract more major sins such as pride, within a month. Unlike now, where they could only wait for the arrival of the next month. In the blink of an eye, it was the 3rd week of November. In the first class on Monday morning, Professor Shi was still talking about the theoretical knowledge of sacrificial summoning. The students barely managed to hold on until the end of the class, and all of them suddenly became lively. Even Dake couldn't help but smile. The next class was Professor Ka-Zayer's Introduction to Magic. Under Professor Ka-Zayer's guidance, they would start making their second magic elf card in their lives. Of course, there were also people like Dake who had already made their second card. Aima Métis was one of them. When she was in the library, she would occasionally summon her second magic elf. It was a gold coin with wings, and its best skill was to act as a gold coin. 9:50 a.m. Professor Ka-Zayer came to the classroom a full 10 minutes early, but the classroom was already full of students. He looked at the enthusiastic students with satisfaction and clapped his hands at the door. Then 2 human-shaped muscle lumps walked in, carrying a big box. 3 people give out the materials. After taking back the magic elf, Professor Ka-Zayer spoke. Aima, who was always in the first row, stood up silently. The other 2 girls also smiled and followed. Will also help. Nobody knew when it started, but Aima's popularity had become better. I think that everyone here hasn't forgotten, right? Professor Ka-Zayer walked up to the podium after the bell rang. He was as gentle as ever. In this class, we'll practice the basic alchemy method together. Don't look down on it just because it's basic. You have to know that it will be the most common method for you to make magic elves for a long time to come. Now open the textbook and review the specific steps of the basic alchemy method with me. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden cry from below the podium. Shouldn't we start making it immediately? Professor. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on the little magisters when the primordial power erupted. The atmosphere in the classroom took a turn for the worse. But of course, Professor Ka-Zayer didn't care about them and continued with the class. After refreshing the platform for a few hours, he slept for an hour, ate a meal, and updated late. After 12 p.m., he counted the missing chapters. He had to work hard for the next month. 10,000 chapters every day. Up. Thank you for subscribing. Chapter 75. This time, there were still 2 10-credit blank magic cards in the material bag. But other than that, there was no clear division of the materials in the bag. The materials in each bag were slightly different, so the students had to measure them by themselves. After half an hour of revision, the class finally advanced to the practical stage. Dake was already familiar with the process, and the process was as smooth as flowing water. He did not pay attention to the others for the time being. Starting from the combination of elven honey and brain lobe essence, everything was easy. This time, in less than 30 minutes, he had already reached the last step of the basic, random, alchemy method. He activated alchemy formation number 1 and began to seriously add things into it. At this moment, Professor Ka-Zayer was already standing behind him. Deanna wanted to take a closer look, but she could only sneak a peek because of the professor's presence. In terms of probability, the closer the nature of the core material, the higher the success rate of the alchemy. Dake looked at the core materials in front of him and fell into a dilemma. Website: https://m vipcanshu VIP this weekend. In order to get the flower card, he had bought a lot of useless materials. In addition to the 100-year tortoise shell and magic armor fragments, there were also some shell bracelets, snake eyes, magic candies, giant worms, and other strange things. The light of alchemy formation number 1 was already flickering. Dake gritted his teeth. He did not expect the alchemy to succeed this time. Starting from the tortoise shell, he threw in almost all the core materials. Perhaps it was because most of the materials were useless, but the alchemy formation number 1 swallowed them all. However, when the light of the alchemy formation reached its limit, and Dake was about to breathe a sigh of relief, Professor Ka-Zayer suddenly said, "Spit a mouthful of saliva in it." Dake, huh? Professor Ka-Zayer, human saliva contains many kinds of substances. When there are too many core materials, adding a little saliva will have a catalytic effect on the alchemy. Dake looked at him strangely, but he still endured the awkwardness and spat a mouthful of saliva in it. Is this the unpopular knowledge of Professor Ka-Zayer? I love it. In short, After he swallowed the saliva, the light of the refining formation had an obvious change. After half a minute, all the materials were fused and absorbed, and then impurities began to be ejected from the surface of the card. Extract the essence and discard the dregs. This was the most important step of the basic, random formation array. Dake had failed at this step the last time he'd used the cat's fur for crafting, causing the magic card to burn. This time, with all kinds of impurities being spat out, the radiance on the magic card became clearer, as if it was heading straight towards success. But soon, the magic card was drowned by more and more impurities. Dark looked at the pile of impurities that seemed to have appeared out of thin air, and 3 black lines appeared on his face. Worker LLL. It stinks. Deanna covered her nose and whispered. Rose, on the other hand, quietly turned her face to the window. Professor Kazair was already 2 meters away. The increasingly thick stench quickly attracted the attention of the entire classroom. Dake leaned back awkwardly, but he didn't leave. That guy is as fast as ever. Aima pouted and was unwilling to give up. There was a big pile of ancient gold coins on the corner of her desk. Did he fail? Luoboat asked with his mouth open. White shook his head. I don't know. On their desks were the treasures they had gotten from the tin school branch. White had been observing Dake. From the pile of core materials that were worth at least a few hundred credits to the saliva at the end, he saw it all. Then he looked at his pile of treasures and couldn't help but feel sad. The gap between them was always unknowingly created. 1 step slower, and every step slower. If he continued to be satisfied with the status quo, the gap between them would only get bigger. It was like owing a debt, and the more one owed, the more one owed. White gritted his teeth and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. If the saliva works, then what about hair, nails, and other things? Of course, ordinary people's hair and nails wouldn't work. But White knew that he was special. Perhaps the bloodline of the hero could give him some inspiration? Just then, the magic card on Dake's desk finally stopped excreting. He held his breath and put the tweezers into the pile of impurities. He carefully picked up the magic card and put it under the tap to quickly wash it. As the surface stains were washed away, a corner of the magic card was gradually exposed. It was actually faintly emitting a golden halo. Dake's hand trembled and almost dropped the card. Even though he had used Bliss 3 to evolve Ibu-chan into an orange card with 3 skills, the truth was that he only had 2 blue cards with only 1 skill. Apart from the number of skills, the magic elf card itself also emitted a halo of the corresponding color, which could be directly identified by the naked eye. Gold naturally represented a gold card. With 4 skills, it was the nobleman of the magic elf card. Before the appearance of divine cards with divine power, they were directly called divine cards. Dark had never imagined that he would be able to refine real gold from a pile of jinkala. He couldn't wait to use gauze to clean off the last stains on the surface of the card. Finally, he could see the image of the magic elf on the card. A magic elf with a small yellow head emerged from the red shell. It looked like a small demon, but its limbs were like slime tentacles. There were a total of 8 holes in its shell that looked like a tortoise shell. The edges of the holes were white circular protrusions, and its head and limbs extended out from some of the holes. It looked very soft. It's a gold kettlebug. Professor Kazair's exclamation came from behind him. It seemed that Kettlebug had also been copied. But shouldn't it be Kettlebug Turtle? Dake looked at Kettlebug in surprise. This was a super meat shield that exceeded his expectations. Card name, Kettlebug. Type, Elf card. Level, *****. Race, Insect. Attribute, Rock. Magic, 900. Attack, 0 defense, 2200. Killing move, Sturdy = Strength = Defense Power Trick. We already have Ibu-chan, so what if we have another Kettlebug? We're already used to it, isn't it? 3-star card, so what if it has 2200 defense? Isn't this the value that Kettlebug should have? Madam of Bones 3-star attack 0 defense 2200. Guardian of the Giant Shield 4-star attack 100 defense 2600. 1000 Years Shield Technique 5-star attack 0 defense 3000. It's very common. Therefore, Dake turned around and asked with an innocent face, Professor, Is this a very rare magic elf? Ah. Chapter 76. The corner of the professor's mouth twitched, but he still explained. From the data on the interface, the kettle bug is indeed a very rare magic elf. Until now, no one has been able to figure out how to make it. Its rarity is mainly due to its high defense value of 2,200. This is the limit of a first-tier magic elf. Dake nodded slightly. Under normal circumstances, a 3-star magic elf card's top attack and defense value should be 1,500. The textbook clearly recorded the top attack and defense values of each grade of magic elf. 1 star, 5,002 star, 10003 star, 15004 star, 20005 star, 25006 star, 30007 star, 3500. Remember the website, VIP can't you? 68 star, 40009 star, 4500. These top attack and defense values were achieved by giving up one of the values. But there were always a few exceptions. Kettlebug was one of them. As a 3-star magic elf, Kettlebug didn't just give up its attack. Its weakness was very obvious. Its extremely slow speed, and its small size of 0.6 meters made it unable to be a qualified meat shield. So although Kettlebug was rare, it wasn't very versatile. However, the card in Dark's hand was a golden kettle. Moreover, these 4 skills were very practical. Sturdy passive skill. The magic elf with this skill won't be killed in one hit. Equal power sharing. Use your superpower to add your own attack and the opponent's attack, and then divide it equally. Equal defense. Use your superpower to add your own defense and the opponent's defense, and then divide it equally. Power trick. Use your superpower to exchange your own attack and defense values. With these 4 skills, although Kettlebug couldn't be a qualified meat shield, it could be a qualified magic elf. In a regular duel, it would definitely be the enemy's nightmare. Of course, Dake couldn't reveal the skill information of Kettlebug. The magic elf card only showed the magic elf's magic power, attack and defense. The killing skills were all hidden. Although Professor Kazair was very curious, he didn't probe further. He smiled and said, Dimung, the goddess of luck is really looking after you. Dake nodded. I think so too. Ha. Naturally, Dake, as the first place, finished his practical lesson and began to observe other people's refining methods. It was probably because they had experience in making magic beasts that the little mages performed well in this class. Many of them had also successfully made magic elven cards. After Dake, the second to succeed was Aima. Since Aima didn't summon her fairy in class, Dake didn't know what the golden beast was. There were simply too many types of magic guide fairies, and many of them weren't even recorded in books. However, the most eye-catching thing in this lesson was still the hero's son. The completion of Victor's magic elf card was accompanied by an explosion. When everyone turned to look at him, he pulled out a complete magic card from the ashes with a blackened face. Probably because he couldn't wait to see what his magic elf looked like, he directly summoned it from the back of the classroom. It was a giant monster. The giant monster's back was straight, and its head almost reached the ceiling. The moment it appeared, it let out a terrifying roar as if it was venting its anger. Wow! White wiped the dirt off his face and looked up excitedly, revealing his snow-white teeth. If I had this earlier in the secret tunnel, I wouldn't have. Luoboat was confused. White, what are you talking about? Nothing. White laughed. Don't you think my monster is cool? Luoboat couldn't help but cover his nose. I don't know if it's cool or not, but it doesn't look very smart. White said happily. Isn't that what a monster is like? It has no brain, great strength and thick skin. But is it a weakness if it doesn't have a brain? It's fine as long as I have a brain. Luoboat, that makes sense. While the two were talking, Professor Kazair walked over. God, how did you summon a monster in the classroom? White hurriedly said, I'll take it back now. However, the news that the hero's son had created a monster was already known by the whole class. The monster was a standard 3-star magic guide spirit. It had both offense and defense, and could often be seen in the arena. This undoubtedly made White's name shine. Of course, compared to White's monster, Dake was more interested in Deanna's magic guide spirit. It was a brown bear of the earth. As expected of a member of the Bear of the Kingdom, she really had an affinity with bears. Deanna happily hugged her magic guide spirit card and turned around to show it off. Dake could only coax her back as if she was a child. On the other side, Luosi also finished her second creation before class ended. She successfully created her own magic guide spirit. It was a rabbit-type magic guide spirit like her fantasy beast, Snow Rabbit. It seemed to have a sure-kill healing skill. This class was an incomparably huge leap for the first years. Most of the first-year students had their first magic guide sprite that could appear in the competition. At the same time, after learning how to create a magic guide spirit, they could finally rely on their own ability to buy materials and create their own magic guide spirits. It could be said that from this moment onwards, they had truly entered the school of magic. What surprised Dake was that, after this afternoon's potioneering class, White and Luoboat actually took the initiative to find him. They even invited him to a duel. Dake was astonished. Although he was familiar with the school rules and knew that the school supported formal duels between students, he still couldn't understand White's actions. Could it be that White evolved into the main character of a fantasy novel and found the unique rhythm of the main character of a fantasy novel? Increase strength, show off and slap face. Increase strength, show off and slap face. 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 With a strange expression, Dake asked why. But he didn't expect White to come prepared. He and Luoboat looked at each other. As if gaining strength from his good friend's gaze, he said, "I know you haven't looked me in the eye since school started." Dake, huh? White. Don't deny it, I can feel your attitude towards me. Dake. Oh. White. But today, I'll definitely let you know that we're on the same level. Winky-faced Dake. Then do you know the rules of duels between students? White was puzzled. Fair, impartial, and open? Dake couldn't help but want to cover his face. You have to bet at least 100 credits. White. Huh. So you didn't know anything, and came here with a lot of passion? How could you not pay a price for a duel? After the minimum update, I started to add more. I adjusted the bounty, begging for monthly votes, begging for subscriptions. Thank you all for your rewards. Chapter 77. Wait a moment. White's expression changed, and she hurriedly pulled Luoboat to a corner. Only then did the two of them take out their branch cards and input magic power to check the relevant regulations. Then White whispered, "What's going on, Luoboat? Is there really such a thing? Is the school supporting spinach?" Luoboat thought for a moment and said, "I'm not sure, but I think I've heard of a theory." White asked, "What theory?" Luoboat lowered his voice as much as possible. "Our school seems to be the biggest supporter of spinach behind the duel. Werther." "Hey, don't talk nonsense. If the professor hears you, he'll be mad." "Hey, are we still going to continue? By the way, do you really think that you can increase Dake's favorability by showing your strength?" Luoboat said seriously. "Of course. After all, Dake is the only son of a duke. He's born with a noble aura, and it's normal for him to be a little arrogant. Don't be fooled by how approachable he is when he talks to us. But in fact," White asked, "what do you mean?" Luoboat said, "I heard this from my dad's friend. These kinds of people are actually arrogant. The reason why they appear to be amiable is because they don't put others in their eyes. They treat others like cats and dogs. Of course, they won't be angry." White was surprised. "Is that true?" Luoboat said affirmatively. "What else? How do you explain that after so many days his favorability towards you hasn't increased or decreased, and has been hovering around 45? White said, "That makes sense." Luoboat said again, "So it doesn't matter if you win or lose. As long as you show your strength, there's a chance. If you want to unlock the lock of 80 favorability, you have to pay a price." White asked, "Then what about credits?" Luoboat said, "Sorry, I only have 68 credits." White, Dake leaned against the wall and waited for a while. He was actually looking forward to his duel with White. After all, the rhythm of increasing one's strength, acting tough and face-slapping was indeed satisfying. At the same time, he could test out Kettle's abilities. However, when White and Luoboat returned, they both looked embarrassed. White held back for a long time before she finally said, "How about lending me 1 point? Borrow 1 point? Dake was stunned. "You guys only have 99 points? Huh. White scratched his head and said awkwardly, "Didn't I use up all the materials I bought?" "Wait a minute, didn't you go to the 10 school branch to get your materials? But as the saying goes, life is hard, don't expose it." Dake's EQ wasn't that low. He said helplessly, "I'm not someone who won't even lend a single credit." But as soon as he said this, Victor's expression changed again. He said, "Wait a moment." Then he pulled Robert and ran back to the corner. White whispered, "Luoboat, if we had borrowed credits from Dake back then, wouldn't it have been easy?" Luoboat, "Ah." White, "For example, if I have 10 credits and someone wants to borrow 5 credits from me, I wouldn't be willing to lend it to them. But what if I have 1,000 credits? Luoboat, "But we didn't even talk to him back then." White, "It's not like that. Just like your analogy, it's the same as giving some food to cats and dogs when we see them." Luoboat, "White, promise me don't be so humble, okay?" White, Luoboat, "Actually, if we had borrowed money we might have lost more, so don't worry about it." White, "Okay." After a while, White and Luoboat came to Dake again. Dake originally wanted to say that borrowing credits from someone to duel with sounded a bit stupid, so why not set up another appointment tomorrow? But White put on an "I'm ready, let's do it" expression. Dake had no choice but to give him 1 credit. There were still people who borrowed money to give it away. What a weirdo. Dake said, "So where should we duel? A battle hall?" White hurriedly waved his hand. "There are too many people there. How about a corner of the castle?" Dake nodded. "That's fine." And so, the 3 of them went directly to a corner on the first floor of the castle. There were too many corners like this in the castle that nobody cared about. Luoboat said, "I'll be the referee. The duel will be a variant of the elite mode, and only 1 magic guide sprite can be used. If the magic guide sprite loses, it's your loss. With your school card as proof, the wager is 100 credits. Do either side have any objections?" No objections. X2, and so, the contract was established. The 3 school cards were recorded. Dake just happened to want to experiment with Kettle's ability, so he took it out. And White naturally had Troll in hand, so he was full of confidence. Although he had discussed it with Luoboat, and said that it didn't matter who won or lost, how could he really have such a cowardly idea? If it was a duel, then he had to win. The 2 of them pulled about 5 meters apart, each holding a magic guide sprite card in hand. Luoboat suddenly shouted, "Countdown to battle, 3, 2, 1, start." They directly entered the battle stage. Dake and White's expressions changed almost at the same time. "In my name, magic guide summon. Come out, Kettle." Dake casually swiped, and it only took him 6 seconds to complete the normal summon. Kettle, which hadn't breathed fresh air since its birth, materialized as a small sprite that didn't look powerful at all. Roar. It was a little late. The troll summoned by White suddenly landed and roared at Kettle. The stench from its mouth distorted the space, as if there were ripples radiating. This troll, which was close to 4 meters tall, was also a 3-star magic guide sprite, but its attributes were very average and powerful. Card name: Troll. Type: Sprite card. Level: *****. Race: Subhuman. Attribute: Normal. Magic power: 1200. Attack: 1500. Defense: 1400. Ultimate skill: Suicidal Tackle. Its attack value reached the maximum of 3 stars under normal circumstances, and its magic power and defense weren't weak either. It was a regular sprite that had been thoroughly studied by the magisters in the competition. Regular didn't mean weak. On the contrary, it was undoubtedly a synonym for strong. It was precisely because it was strong enough and easy to use that it could frequently appear in duels. As a troll of the normal element, It had almost no weaknesses. It was an excellent choice to expand the number of cards in the deck. And its ultimate skill, Suicidal Tackle, could inflict heavy damage to the enemy at the cost of reducing its magic power by half. When the troll showed its unparalleled power, both White and Luoboat couldn't help but show an excited expression. Go troll! Under White's command, the troll immediately moved its thick legs and stepped toward the ant-like Kettle. In just 2 or 3 steps, it was in front of Kettle. Then it raised its foot high and stomped down heavily. Boom! Smoke and dust rose. Did we win? Chapter 78. White watched excitedly. He didn't think the little red tortoise could withstand the monster's stomp. But 3 seconds later, the sluggish monster suddenly let out a blood-curdling screech. Under the gaze of the 3 humans, it suddenly raised its foot to cover its mouth and jumped up like a rabbit with 1 foot. Looking at its cold sweat and continuous screams, it seemed to be in real pain. In the center of its right foot, there was a blood-red ball-shaped dent. But Huahu, who was stomped on, nonchalantly stuck its tentacle-like head out of the hole. Beezity. Roar. Provoked and humiliated, the monster's eyes gradually overflowed with a blood-red color. Thick and long veins bulged at the corners of its eyes. It looked at Huahu with a strange expression. Website: https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP without Victor's orders. The giant monster suddenly raised its extremely long arms and clenched its 2 gigantic fists tightly. Then it suddenly jumped and landed on the ground in an arch. Its upper body bent down, and its 2 fists hammered down with all its might. Bang! Huahu bounced up again, but it shrunk its shell very quickly. There wasn't even a scratch on its red tortoise shell. White and Luoboat had never seen such a degree of violence up close. Luoboat was already dumbstruck. He had completely forgotten his duty as a referee. White was a little better, but he was still too shocked to speak. The only thing he knew was that this was his monster. A strong, reliable, invincible monster. Bang! 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 The monster didn't stop. It hammered Huahu again and again. Only Dake could see that the monster's palms were abnormally red and swollen. But it was completely different from its previous screams of pain. The monster seemed to have entered a slightly berserk state. In this slightly berserk state, it had obviously lost its sense of pain. It was doing useless things over and over again. Yes, the brave and invincible monster in White's eyes was just a little brain paralyzed in Dake's eyes. Huahu was clearly so small and light. Its attack was still 0. Wouldn't it be better to throw it away? Why did it have to be hammered? But it was still a monster known for its stupidity. It could be pardoned. Dake watched calmly. He had learned from textbooks that the attack and defense values displayed on the Magic Elf card could be used as a reference, but only as a reference. Every magic guiding spirit had different attack and defense values, according to its own condition, every part of its body, and every attack method. Huahu, for example, only its shell could reach the limit of 2,200. Its body was quite weak. Even if it was a shell, not every part of it had a defense of 2,200. Every powerful archmage knew the true situation of their own magic guiding fairies like the back of their hand, and were adept at displaying their most powerful points in battle. Now, under the attacks of the giant monster, the strength of Huahu's defense was gradually revealed. After a full minute of continuous hammering, Huahu was still unharmed, but the monster wasn't discouraged. Instead, it became even more berserk. That's enough, monster. Use your hands and grab it. White, who was immersed in ecstasy, finally calmed down after a full minute. He hurriedly gave the best command he could think of. The monster heard the command and suddenly froze in place for half a second. Then it opened its red and swollen palm and slammed it down. Divide the power equally. Dake's voice finally sounded. Huahu, who had been passively beaten for more than a minute, immediately opened its sharp eyes. When the monster's palm fell, the power between the two sides was completely divided. Then, Huahu raised one of its hands and successfully blocked the giant monster's attack. The scene froze at this moment. It felt like the monster was holding up the sky with one hand. The monster panted heavily, its face becoming more and more ferocious. Monster, sacrificial. White saw that the monster didn't seem to be able to do anything to Huahu. He made a prompt decision and ordered it to use the sure-kill skill, sacrificial impact. But this time, the monster suddenly turned its body and glared fiercely at its master with its blood-red eyes. The murderous aura was already leaking out uncontrollably. White felt a chill in his heart. His voice became sluggish, and the command was interrupted. Dake on the other side asked lightly, "God, does your monster have a berserk skill?" "Berserk? I don't think so. This is just a blue." White raised his hand. Suddenly, his face changed dramatically. The monster magic card, which was originally emitting a blue glow, was now surrounded by a purple halo. And in the feedback information after he injected his magic power, there was the berserk skill. Not good. His heart suddenly skipped half a beat. The monster had already gone completely berserk. Roar. It opened its arms and its face was terrifying. Its bloody mouth suddenly opened, revealing a mouthful of jagged sharp fangs. Then it suddenly turned its head to look at Luoboat, who was standing at the side of the field. Maybe it was the nature of creatures to bully the weak and fear the strong. Even if the monster had gone completely berserk, it still keenly targeted the weakest Luoboat. Luoboat probably couldn't have imagined that he was just standing outside the field as a referee, and that he would suffer such an unexpected disaster. His face was full of fear. He struggled to pull out his fantasy beast, fortress card from his card pack, but his lips were trembling. He couldn't even use the usual summoning skill. The monster didn't give him any extra time. The huge black shadow blocked Luoboat's vision. His pupils dilated rapidly. He was completely intimidated by the monster's murderous aura after it went berserk. He couldn't even run away. White. He leaned against the wall, almost crying. "Luoboat, don't be afraid. I'll take it back now." White hurriedly shook the monster magic card, trying to take the monster back into the card. But there was no response to his call. The monster waved its hand and grabbed Luoboat in its hand. But just as it was about to throw Luoboat out, someone caught its heel. It was a small kettle, but it lifted the monster's heel like it was lifting a car. The monster's body lost its balance, and in the process of leaning forward, it slammed into the wall. Luoboat found that the fingers holding him had loosened, and hurriedly tried to escape. But he just happened to cross paths with Dake. Dake looked at the monster with great interest. It suddenly occurred to him that this couldn't be the story in the first Harry Potter book, where the three of them had formed a friendship. But he quickly shook his head. This should be a normal world, and there shouldn't be any plot inertia. Everyone's fate was in their own hands. It was very likely that this situation was just a small coincidence. Relying on the power trick, Kettle turned into a 2,200 attack Hercules and grabbed the monster's toe. Thank you for subscribing. Looking for monthly votes. Heartsuit. Chapter 79. In reality, the monster only had 750 attack left. Even though it still had a huge body and an intimidating aura, it was nothing in front of Huahu's 2,200 attack. Busy. With a roar, Huahu grabbed the monster's toe and threw it in a spiral, sending it crashing into the wall. Should it be said that this was indeed a Shungmalian castle? Even after such a terrifying impact, it was still intact. It only shook a little and some dust fell off. But the monster was already sprawled on the wall. Its head was the most heavily injured, and it was about to enter the berserk state. It could no longer resist White's card call, and was forcefully recalled. At the same time, the faint light on Huahu's body quickly faded. Huahu had 4 skills. Apart from the passive skill, Sturdy, each skill cost 100 mana and lasted for a very short time. In addition, its total mana was only 900, and its skills also had cooldowns. Remember the URL. MVIP can't you? 6. This meant that under normal circumstances, Huahu could only throw one punch. But after all, it was only a 3-star magic elf that could be summoned normally. It was worthy of the title of Gold Card. Dake was very satisfied with Huahu's card call, but White's face was ashen. No one could have predicted that things would turn out this way. But White still felt guilty. He quickly ran to Luoboat's side and asked if he was hurt. Luoboat was lucky. Other than being shocked, he was fine. Dake saw Luoboat hugging White and almost crying. He shook his head and turned to leave. As for the bet, he wasn't actually a person who followed the school rules. But he had only taken a few steps when White stopped him. White clenched his teeth and insisted, "You win, but I'll win back next time." Dake nodded and said, "Good luck." White's expression froze, but he still swiped 100 points and said that he would pay back the 1 point he owed in the morning. When Dake left with his back to them, Luoboat quickly reminded White. White slowly took out Taboo Love and pointed it at the back of Dake's head. Dake's heart skipped a beat, but he pretended not to notice and gradually disappeared around the corner. "How was it?" Luoboat wiped his tears and asked. White showed him Taboo Love. It was still 45 points. Luoboat was shocked. Victor nodded with an ashen face, but then said, "Maybe it's because I didn't perform well. Damn it, I can't even control my own magic guiding fairy. How can there be such trash?" Robert asked doubtfully, "Are you scolding yourself?" "White, can you not say? So that's how it is." Dake turned and left after pausing around the corner for a while. White's real goal wasn't too different from what he'd guessed. Actually, when he thought about it carefully, it left him speechless. But to be able to easily discover that the back of his head was being peeped at showed that he had practiced his dark magic well, at least a lot faster than Professor Kazayer's prediction. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could completely master the secret method for condensing mental strength. When that time came, he wouldn't have to worry about being peeped at by Taboo Love. In fact, Taboo Love had very little effect on him. He only saw a little future threat from it. Since there was a way to peer into one's thoughts in this world, he had to guard against it. The dark magic was only a preliminary restraint. He would have to find a more powerful restraint later. After returning to the dormitory, Dake first tested the effects of the Big Sin series of cards on Kettle Pot. There were some effects, but apart from an obvious increase in the level of intelligence, there weren't any decisive changes in ability like Ibu's. Dake guessed that it had to do with the uniqueness of illusory magical beast, Ibu. Not all magic guiding fairies had the ability to change like Eevee. Of course, it could also be that Kettle Pot wasn't compatible with Pride or Bliss, or it could simply be that Kettle Pot's transformation potential had already reached its peak. After Dake recorded the experimental data, he continued to study things on the level of thought. At about 8:30 in the evening, he suddenly stopped writing and drew a picture of Kettle Pot in his notebook. He also drew a few fruits next to Kettle Pot. Yes, no wonder I kept feeling like I was forgetting something. Kettle Pot is a type of fairy. Apart from battle, it also has a very important ability. The interior of its carapace, which is like a pot, can dissolve the stored fruit and ferment it into a sticky, delicious fruit juice. That kind of fruit juice even has the special ability to restore physical strength. Considering the uniqueness of the fruit itself, this world might not have fruit like the one in the dream world. But if we use other fruits instead, we might be able to ferment some pretty good fruit juice. Out of curiosity, Dake couldn't help but look at the large pile of fruits in the corner. Those were the fruits he bought to collect flower cards. He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to finish them all. Just right for an experiment. Since it was an experiment, of course, he couldn't just randomly stuff all the fruits into his brain. Dake divided the fruits into different categories. First were apples, then oranges, then pears. He bought these. Let's start with apples. Dake excitedly took out Kettle Pot's magical card and performed a normal summon. There were 8 holes in Kettle Pot's carapace. He could stuff the fruits into these 8 holes. If he couldn't stuff it in, then he would cut the fruit into pieces. Dake put the cut apple into one of the holes. Kettle Pot, whose intelligence level had increased to 3.0, immediately twisted its body and rubbed against Dake's hand. Good boy. Dake comforted it. After Kettle Pot understood what he meant, it retracted its body back into its carapace and quickly dissolved and fermented. In less than 5 minutes, the amount of 3 apples was successfully fermented into delicious apple juice. Dake thanked Kettle Pot and temporarily put it back into the magical card. He replenished its magic while summoning the little devil beast. The little devil beast flew down from the bird stand and looked at the 3 cups of apple juice on the table. This time, it actually showed a drooling expression. As a familiar, it didn't actually need to eat. It only needed to return to the academy card regularly to replenish its magic. Of course, as the other half of a digital beast, it did have the ability to eat. Pick a cup and drink it. Dake tempted it. The little fiendish magical beast lowered its head, moved closer to the nearest cup, and drank the entire cup of apple juice in one gulp. How is it? Dake was suddenly concerned. The little devil beast squinted its eyes and savored it carefully. After a while it said, "Does my head feel better?" In short, it was confirmed that it wasn't poisonous. Dake also picked up a cup and savored it carefully. Then, his brain that had become tired from reading for a long time, actually became active again. Is it good for the brain? This is like an apple. It's time for the 5th watch, looking for monthly votes, looking for follow-up orders Heartsuit. Chapter 80. Apples had high nutritional value, and were rich in minerals and vitamins. They were mild, sweet, and slightly sour. They could stimulate saliva and quench thirst, clear away heat, and improve digestion. Of course, there was also a weak effect of nourishing the brain, nourishing the blood, and calming the mind. However, after being converted by Kettle, this part of the effect was amplified. There were many magic potions with similar functions, but it was impossible to make such a delicious magic potion with just one apple. It was also at this time, Dake suddenly realized that the Kettle worm in this world might not have the ability to extract juice. Otherwise, the streets would be filled with juices. I'll find a chance to go to the library tomorrow and check it out. Dake continued his experiment. This time he used oranges. 3 oranges, 3 cups of orange juice. Remember, https://mvipcanshu. VIP. The little fiend drank first as a sign of respect. Then its face turned green, and it rushed into the toilet. There was the sound of water, and when it came out again it was refreshed. Dake did not touch the other 2 cups of orange juice. Finally, he picked 3 pears, and put them into Kettle's shell to quickly dissolve and ferment them. The 3 cups of pear juice that he obtained smelled sweet and refreshing. Without Dake's order, the little fiend drank one of the cups in one gulp. Then, it suddenly narrowed its eyes and stood still for a long time. Dake asked, "How is it?" The little fiend said, "It's getting cold this society." Dake was speechless. He picked up a cup of pear juice and took a sip. He did feel that his throat was a little cold, and there was a strange refreshing feeling in his lungs. Clearing heat, stopping coughing and moistening the lungs? It tastes like rock sugar and pear. So Dake wrote in his notebook, apple juice nourishes the brain and refreshes the mind. Orange juice stimulates the appetite. Pear juice reduces heat and clears the lungs. Why does it feel like an old Chinese doctor? After Dake finished writing, he was amused. Kettle's ability was indeed powerful. It could ferment all kinds of fruits into juice with special effects. However, the fruits used in the experiment were all ordinary fruits. The special effects extracted were not particularly strong. This weekend, he could go to Traveler's Street and pick some fruits with special effects to ferment. Perhaps he could get some fruit juice that was comparable to a magic potion. In addition, the fruit that the cat grass was about to bear could also be fermented. These were all points that could be considered. After concluding, Dark nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he looked at the remaining 4 cups of fruit juice. It seems that Luo Si said that he has indigestion. Maybe it's because he ate too much beef with Deanna. Yes, Deanna gets sleepy when she reads at night, and she gets heaty when she eats too much beef. 2 cups for each of us. Dake didn't think too much about it. He found a plate and went out with 4 glasses of juice. Deanna's room was 233, and Luo Si's room was 234. They were easy to remember. It was Dake's first time entering the women's dormitory. He felt that even the floor was cleaner than the men's. Fortunately, it was already past 9 o'clock at night, and there was not a single person in the corridor. Dake arrived at room 233 first and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" A soft voice came from inside the room. "It's me." Dake stood outside the door and waited for a while before Deanna opened the door with a red face. She looked up at Dake and whispered, "It's so late. Why did you suddenly come here?" Dake smiled and moved the plate down. "I made a few extra glasses of juice." "Oh really?" Deanna twisted the corner of her nightgown with her fingers and moved back slightly, revealing a gap in the door. "Come in then. Is it appropriate?" Dake didn't want to go in, but since he was already here, he might as well take a seat. After all, they were close friends on campus. They were both dormitories of the same size, but Deanna's room was much narrower than Dake's. She must have used a lot of credits to decorate her room. Not only were the walls covered with pink wallpaper, but the corners and shelves of the room were also covered with teddy bears of various sizes. One of the black and white teddy bears with bows on its ears was particularly eye-catching. Isn't that Deanna's familiar?" Dake glanced at the panda familiar that was forced to wear a floral dress, and suddenly felt that he was quite nice to this little monster. At least it didn't have to wear a dress. Dake put down the plate, picked up a glass of orange juice and apple juice, and moved it to the desk. There was also a half-completed exercise book on the desk. It seemed that Deanna was having a fierce battle with them just now. Orange juice. It's good for the stomach, but don't drink too much. Apple juice. It's refreshing. Drink some when you're sleepy. Deanna leaned over and sniffed, then returned the orange juice to Dake. "I don't need this." Dake. "Okay, that's true." Then Deanna picked up the apple juice and drank it. After a while, her eyes lit up and she suddenly felt a lot clearer. "It's here. It's here. I'm in the zone." Dake smiled. "Do you want pear juice? It's good for clearing heat." "Hee hee." Deanna rolled her eyes and pointed next door. "Give it to Luosi. She's having a lot of heat." Dake nodded. "Then I'll go." Deanna. "Okay." Then Dake knocked on Luosi's door again. Luosi opened the door and stuck her head out. When she saw Dake, she invited him in. She was wearing a white nightgown. Her belly was slightly bulging and her lips were dry and cracked. Obviously, she had eaten too much beef and hadn't digested it yet. Dake left the orange juice and pear juice for her. After returning to the dormitory, Dake looked at the orange juice left by Luosi and considered whether to drink it or not. In the end, he chose to drink it. Needless to say, after coming out of the bathroom, he felt a lot more refreshed. Apple juice and pear juice are good things. I can always have some in the future. The calendar turned over. During the dual class of the first period on Tuesday, Professor Cheongsi learned that the first-year students had created new magical fairies yesterday, so she selected a few students to demonstrate their skills on stage. With all kinds of new magical fairies, the battles between the students were much more interesting than when they only had fantasy beasts. Someone suggested that they hold an in-class competition like last time. However, Professor Cheongsi said that it wasn't time yet. Magical fairy cards were the biggest category among the 5 major categories of magical cards. The next in-class competition would be held after most of the students had created their first magic card or item card. As for the venue card and the mystic card, they were extremely advanced content. She didn't expect the first-year students to learn it in the first semester. After this class, White came as scheduled and returned the 1 credit that she owed to Dake yesterday. The hero's son was always enthusiastic when it came to returning the money. Dake accepted the 1 credit and thought about how to create a magic card or item card. Maybe I can use the fermented juice from kettle as the core material. Monthly votes. Chapter 81. There was no need to wait for the professors to teach. After Dake had an idea, he went straight to the library after the history of magic in the afternoon. Soon he found a book called Pierre Explains to You in Person: How to Refine Magic Potions into Magic Cards. Pierre was a very famous potion chemist in the history of magic. From his point of view, there was no magic potion that couldn't be refined into a magic card. This explanation book was as thick as 3 fingers, making people feel intimidated just by looking at it. Not to mention the first-year students, even the senior students rarely had the courage to take it down from the bookshelf. After Dake took it down, he suddenly remembered that he still had a problem to solve. He temporarily put it on the table in the reading room and used his shoulder bag to occupy the space. He then continued to search through the bookshelf. Soon he found an illustrated handbook about insects and flipped through it to the description of the kettlepot bug. The description in the book was relatively brief, but it roughly wrote down everything that should be written. The kettlepot bug was a rare magic fairy that didn't exist in this world. It could only be refined by chance. In fact, most of the kettlepot bug were white cards and had no skills. The rarer blue cards had at most the passive skill sturdy. The first website was https://m. Vipcanchu. VP. There was no skill like power trick at all. The card name of the kettlepot bug was called Kettlepot Bug. It had a one-word difference with Dake's kettlepot. Perhaps it was this one-word difference that made these two magic fairies that looked exactly the same have different life forms. Coupled with the activation of the Big Sin series of magic cards, it led to the kettlepot having the special ability to ferment fruits into juice. In other words, his kettlepot was absolutely unique. After resolving the doubts in his heart, Dake returned to the reading room. He suddenly noticed that someone was flipping through the extremely long Pierre Explains to You in Person book in the seat he occupied. He walked over and tapped the table lightly. Cough, cough, cough. Emma raised her head and glanced at him. Then, she quietly closed her book and returned to her seat. Dake pretended that nothing had happened and began to study. The beginning of the book explained the difference between magic potions and magic potions that had been refined into magic cards. After being refined into a magic card, the potion would be classified into a magic card and an item card according to the different forms, but the actual effect would not be too different. The existing magic potions were generally one-time use and would be gone after drinking them. After being refined into a magic card, it became a reusable magic potion card. However, the drawback of the magic potion card was that its effects would be weakened and would not last long. For example, a potion that could restore 10 points of magic power per second after being refined into a potion card might only restore 10 points of magic power per use. The advantage of the magic potion card was that it was easy to use, easy to carry around, and could be used repeatedly. Of course, the more precious the potion, the more difficult it would be to refine it into a magic potion card. Without sufficient skill, one might lose everything. For an archmage, if they wanted to use magic potions in a duel, they had to refine the magic potion into a magic potion card. Learning how to make magic potion cards was something every mage had to go through. From that afternoon onwards, Dake began to read slowly and put other things aside for the time being. However, Deanna began to ask him for apple juice every day. Luo, on the other hand, had developed a strong interest in pear juice. Apple juice could refresh the brain and was suitable as a learning drink. Moreover, it tasted good. Dake could understand why Deanna would ask him for apple juice, but what the hell was pear juice? He knew that it could reduce heat, but he could not be heaty every day, right? It was not until Luo told him that it could reduce heat, detoxify, and prevent pimples that he finally understood. But was it really effective? Dake expressed that he did not understand. There was a limit to what a person could do, so he did not continue to pursue it. In the blink of an eye, it was Friday. After the dual class in the morning, the students were looking forward to the trip to Traveler's Street again. There was only a week left before Halloween, and more people began to care about their costumes for the masquerade ball. The upperclassmen were even contacting their partners for the ball. The Halloween ball was not as romantic as the Christmas ball, and there was also the usual ghost hunting activity. In the past, it was not very popular among couples. However, it was different this time. The princess of the kingdom was scheduled to attend, and the style of the ball had been raised from a strange masquerade event to another dimension. There were even students who announced on the spot that this time, they had to wear the most formal costumes and transform into the prince who was most compatible with the princess. The goal was to dance with the princess. As for how he was ridiculed by others, that was another matter altogether. In short, those funny and strange costumes were not as popular as last year. Instead, outfits such as the vampire series, the night series, the palace series, and other outfits that could show off the beauty and temperament of the person wearing the costume became more popular. The male and female students also started to have other ideas because of the gradually romantic atmosphere. They began to look for a dance partner. The first-year students did not have the advanced awareness of the upperclassmen, and it would take a few more days for it to explode. At this time, Dake entered Traveler's Street to look for suitable fruit ingredients. Traveler's Street was filled with fruit shops, but they were really shops that sold pears and apples. Of course, he would also buy some apples and pears to bring back, but his main goal now was the fruits with special effects. For example, the legendary dragon saliva fruit. Just kidding. Even if there really was one, Dake couldn't afford it. He first went to the Wind Traveler material shop. But not long after he walked out again. Wind Traveler did have all sorts of ingredients, but the only thing that was related to fruits was dried fruit. And it was known that dried fruit had no juice. After leaving the Wind Traveler, Dake strolled around the street for a while before entering the Goo Goo Bird Flower and Wood Shop, where he had previously bought the worm tree. Buying fruit from a flower and wood shop sounded very unreliable. However, in the golden autumn season, there were many flowers and trees in the shop that bore fruit. As the boss, the fat auntie clearly remembered the first-year student who could afford the worm tree. When Dake asked, she smiled and said, "I can sell it, but the fruit is part of the value of the flowers and trees. If you buy the fruit, won't my flowers and trees be hard to sell?" Dake also smiled and said, "But the fruit is ripe, so it has to be picked. I only need to buy one or two that are picked or dropped." Fat auntie, "That's not a lot. Maybe there isn't what you want." Dake, "I can take a look. Today, even if I die and am nailed to the coffin, I will write the remaining 3 chapters in the tomb. Before 6 p.m. Chapter 82. The fat auntie was obviously biased towards Dake. However, for a first-year student who was studious, polite, and had a cute and handsome face, how could he not be liked? She waved at Dake and walked to the counter. Dake came to the counter and saw her carrying a basket from below. The basket wasn't big, and there were only 5 fruits in it. Dake didn't know much about plants, so he couldn't tell what kind of plants these fruits came from. However, it wasn't shameful to not know, but it was shameful to pretend to know. Therefore, he asked curiously, "Auntie, what kind of plants do these fruits come from, and what are their effects?" The fat auntie reached into the basket and pulled 3 fruits together. She said, "These 3 are the fruits of the singing tree." The singing tree was a type of bonsai that could make a sound when the sun shone on it. It was said to be a green alarm clock that was very suitable to be kept in the dormitory. However, this was the first time Dake knew that the singing tree could produce fruits. He remembered the website, MVIP 6. The 3 fruits were only the size of a longan and looked like 3 large blueberries. However, what were the special effects of the singing tree's fruits? Could they make people learn how to growl? Dake raised his head and looked at the fat auntie. The fat auntie smiled and said, "You first-year students might not have learned that the singing tree's fruits are actually one of the core materials of the mute card. They can absorb sound waves." Dake thought about it and said, "That can't be right. If the singing tree's fruits can absorb sound waves, then wouldn't the singing tree be unable to make any sound after it grows fruits?" The fat auntie shook her head and said, "On the contrary, after it grows fruits, the singing tree's sound will become louder. It will absorb sound waves and store them before exploding again." Dake still didn't understand, but the fat auntie obviously didn't want to continue. She took out one of the remaining 2 fruits and placed it on the table. This fruit looked like a pineapple, but was only the size of a palm. The fat auntie said, "This is the fruit of the spiral tree." Dake was confused and said, "Spiral tree? What kind of tree is that?" The fat auntie pointed at one of the small trees in the shop. Dake looked over. It was a strange little tree with a spiral trunk. Its leaves curled up like wind chimes, and as the wind blew, they emitted a chime-like sound. "So why don't you just call it the wind chime tree?" The fat auntie said. "Applying the leaves of the spiral tree on the root of the ear can effectively prevent the symptoms of dizziness. Currently, The best-selling carsickness sticker was made with the leaves of the spiral tree as the main material. Its fruit, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It can make people drunk even without wine, and make the world spin. Dake was instantly interested in the pineapple-like fruit. The fat auntie picked up the last fruit. It was a translucent fruit the size of a citrus. Upon closer inspection, one could even see the core of the fruit. The fat auntie said, "This is the fruit of the worm tree." Dake was shocked. Can a worm tree bear fruit? Of course, the fat auntie explained with a smile. However, it requires a very special method to grow its fruit. Its fruit is very rare and can store a person's temporary memory. It can be released as long as a little magic is injected. It is a natural memory ball. There were 3 chirping tree fruits, 1 spiral tree fruit, and 1 worm tree fruit. There were a total of 5 fruits. Among them, the chirping tree fruit was the cheapest, only 10 credits each. The spiral tree fruit was slightly more expensive, 30 credits each. As for the worm tree fruit, its price was actually equivalent to half a worm tree. Although Dake had credits, he couldn't spend them recklessly. In the end, he didn't buy the worm tree fruit. Instead, he spent 60 credits on the other 4 fruits. The main reason was that he couldn't imagine what the fruit of the worm tree could do after being fermented into juice. If he wanted to store memories, wasn't there a worm tree planted there? Getting another fruit of the worm tree was really superfluous. On the other hand, the chirping tree fruit and the spiral tree fruit seemed to be quite useful. After leaving the cuckoo bird flower shop, Dake began to walk around again. There were many areas in Traveler's Street that weren't open to first-year students. This was mainly because first-year students still didn't have a complete understanding of magic. If they were exposed to too many dangerous things, it would only be harmful. Dake walked around and finally found a magic potion shop. Not only did the magic potion shop sell ready-made magic potions, but it also sold some of the ingredients for making magic potions. Naturally, it involved fruits, herbs, and the like. Moreover, the fruits here were clearly priced and had detailed information written on them. Dake picked a few whitewood fruits and blue fruits. The whitewood fruit was one of the core ingredients for making healing plasters. The blue fruit was the raw material for making the magic recovery potion. In Professor Thompson's magic classes, Dake used the blue fruit to make the magic recovery potion and magic recovery potion. He even kept the potions made in those 2 classes in the dormitory. Once he learned how to make magic potions into magic cards, he would prioritize those 2 potions for experimentation. The whitewood fruit and the blue fruit were 20 credits each, which was a discounted price for students. He bought 5 of each. Dusk was approaching, and the sky was slightly dark. Dake carried bags of various sizes and returned with a full load. There were many people around him who returned with a full load, but they were all loaded with candy, snacks, clothes, and jewelry. Of course, there were also people like Ai Ma, who let 2 poor otters help carry 2 piles of books. When Dake returned to the castle, he happened to meet Deanna, who was full and ready to go shopping with Luo Si. Just as Dake opened his mouth, Deanna quickly said, it's done, all the homework is done." "Then it's fine." Dake watched their backs disappear into the distance like a kind old father. After returning to the dormitory, Dake sorted out a bunch of things and organized them for about half an hour before he summoned the kettle to ferment a cup of apple juice and took a sip. Slightly refreshed, Dake couldn't wait to take out the whistling tree fruit. There were a total of 4 fruits. Among them, the effects of the whitewood fruit and the blue fruit were predictable. Only the whistling tree fruit and the spiral tree fruit were still in suspense. He was curious about the effects of these 2 fruits if they were fermented into juice. Among them, there were 3 whistling tree fruits, which had more room for error. It was just right for the first experiment. In the end, a whistling tree fruit the size of a longan took a full 15 minutes to ferment. In order to complete the fermentation of the whistling tree fruit, Dake had to continuously replenish Kettle's magic. When he finally succeeded, he couldn't help but sigh in relief. Then he smiled and looked at the little devil that was about to sneak away. Chapter 83. A longan-sized singing tree fruit could only produce a small cup of juice after being dissolved and fermented. The juice was dark blue and didn't look like it could be drunk by humans. Fortunately, the little fiend wasn't human. Dake couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The little fiend was forced to fly back. It lowered its head and carefully took a sip of the juice in the small cup. There was a hint of sweetness. With this thought in mind, the little fiend unknowingly drank the entire cup of songshu fruit juice. How do you feel? The little fiend was very touched by Dake's late concern. It turned around and said. Dake couldn't help but wonder, what did you say? Little demonic beast. Remember in 1 second. https://m, VIP can't you? VIP Dake. Oh? The little fiend. Dake. Why don't you say it? The little fiend. Dake. If you don't say it, how would I know what you want to say? The little fiend. In short, the little fiend couldn't make a sound. Dake, of course, immediately realized the problem. He glanced at the clock and noted the time. Without the little fiend, Dake obviously wouldn't do any random experiments. He picked a book and read for a while. It wasn't until the little fiend suddenly let out a ah sound that he got up to record the time. Will it last for about 8 minutes? Should I say that it's really one of the materials to make the mute card? SSS. If I use this juice according to the method of making the potion card, can I find another way to make a different mute card? As long as one was a first-year student, there wasn't a single person who wasn't envious of Professor Shi-Erfa's mute card. That kind of boldness that could make everyone quiet down with the wave of his hand was just too cool. It was a pity that making the mute card was a skill that only seniors could learn. Whether it was the technical difficulty or the quality of the materials, the requirements were very high. Among the first-year students, even Dake was self-aware. He didn't even think about touching that level of refining. However, he seemed to have a chance now. With that thought in mind, Dake carefully stored the remaining 2 singing tree fruits away. Although the singing tree fruit wasn't expensive, most of the singing tree fruits that could be bought on Traveler's Street were dried fruits that had been processed, unless one went to a florist's shop to try their luck. After that, Dake extravagantly took out a spiral fruit that cost 30 credits each for an experiment. The spiral fruit took about 15 minutes to ferment. Fortunately, Dake had mastered the mana replenishing technique, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to brew it. The juice of the spiral fruit tree had a strange black and white color. It would swirl with a slight stir. A spiral fruit finally fermented into a cup of juice. Seeing that there was only 1 cup of black and white juice, Dake thought for a moment before scooping a spoonful with a silver spoon and passing it to the little fiend. Dake, ah! The little devil beast, ah! A spoonful went down his stomach. The little demonic beast extended its claws and spiraled into the sky. Dake poked its belly, and it giggled. Dake let out a sigh of relief and asked, "How is it? Are there any abnormalities?" The little devil beast, hee. Dake, the little devil beast, hee. Alright, this time it was the ears. Dake felt that he had discovered the secret of the spiral fruit tree. The little devil beast's hearing impediment lasted for about 2 minutes before it recovered. Dake confirmed the effects of the 2 tree juices and wrote in his notebook, singing tree juice, unable to make a sound. Spiral tree juice, hearing impediment. Drinking the 2 juices together is both deaf and mute. Dake looked at the cup of spiral tree juice and thought about how to preserve it. Apart from that, he couldn't help but think that if the 2 juices were mixed together, would the effects be lost? Or would it be both? Should I try again? He did as he thought. Dake took another singing tree fruit and let kettle dissolve and ferment it into juice. Then he took a spoonful of both juices and put it into another small cup and mixed it carefully. After the black and white juices mixed with the dark blue juices, there was no color fusion. Instead, it presented a wonderful liquid of black, white and blue. After being forced to take a bite, the little demon beast became a deaf-mute beast for real. The effects seemed to be stronger as it lasted for a full 5 minutes. Dake suddenly realized something. Then, he looked at the remaining amount of the 2 juices and fermented the last singing tree fruit into juice. This way he could try to achieve a 1:1 ratio. After that, he mixed the 2 juices, covered it with a lid, and put it aside for the time being. It was already 8:30 at night. Dake knew that it was time to put what he had learned to use. Without a suitable preservation method, the shelf life of the two juices wouldn't be long. The best way was to use it while it was hot, and directly make it into a magic potion card. Of course, he wasn't so bold as to use it for his first experiment of making a magic potion card. With the dried white fruit and the blue fruit, it wouldn't be their turn either. Anyway, the first step was to put the dried white fruit or the blue fruit into Kettle's shell. But at this moment Dake, who had just completed a small fusion, suddenly had some distracting thoughts. He put a dried white fruit and a blue fruit into Kettle's shell. The two fruits dissolved and fermented in the shell at the same time, and finally formed a mixed liquid. Dake first used Pride Eye to make the little devil beast arrogant, and let it use Small Dart to consume its magic power. Then, he scooped out a spoonful of the mixed juice and fed it. After absorbing this spoonful of mixed juice, the little devil beast did feel its magic power quickly recovering. As for the other half of the healing effect, it didn't show up yet. But this was enough for Dake. He didn't want to become a fatty in one bite. After that, he took out. Pierre personally explains it to you, and started experimenting step by step according to the method recorded in the book. There were many ways to make a magic potion card. If you had to break it down, every magic potion had a different way of making it. What Dake tried was naturally the common method recorded in the book. To be more precise, it was the common method of making mana recovery potion into a magic potion card. Imitating this method and replacing mana recovery potion with mixed juice was Dake's current idea. The creation of a magic potion card was completely different from the magic elven card. From the beginning, it didn't need elven honey, brain lobe essence, and other life cultivation bases. Its core was a type of refining array number 3 called the Dalton refining array. Dalton was a great grand mage, second only to Merlin, who created a new era of transforming magic potions into magic potion cards. Chapter 84. Apart from the core alchemy array number 3, the energy cycle combination of alchemy arrays number 21, number 33, and number 34 was basically used as the core to transform the magic potion into a magic potion card. The most common method of making it was to first pour the magic potion into the magic pen and use it as a pigment. When the sorcerer wrote the magic language on the blank magic card, they would use the most gentle method to gradually transform the surface nature of the blank magic card into the nature of the magic potion. This would achieve the final compatibility with the magic potion and greatly increase the success rate of making the magic potion. The so-called magic language belonged to the knowledge that would only be taught in the second year. It was a bit like computer language. Before the second year, the sorcerer could only copy the template to achieve the goal of making the magic potion. They could not wait until they had mastered the magic language and then compile it in their own way. What Dake could do now was, of course, copy. 33 minutes later, Dake looked at the circle of light of the alchemy array on the magic card and knew that he had successfully advanced to the final step. Thanks to his steady fingers and spirit, he had not made any mistakes in the steps of the drawing so far. The first website was https://m.vipcanshu, VIP. The last step was to pour the magic potion into the circle of light formed by the alchemy array number 3. Up until now, the mixed juice made from one dried white fruit and one blue fruit each was only left with more than 1/2 and less than 2/3. He did not know if the mixed juice was enough, so he was a little nervous. But the facts showed that it did not even need that much. He only needed to pour 1/2 of the 2 cups of mixed juice into the alchemy array, and the final fusion began. At this step, external forces could no longer interfere. It relied entirely on the half-formed magic card to make the self-modulation. If the modulation was successful, it would be a success. If the modulation failed, there was a probability that it would turn into an inferior or mutated magic potion card. But most of them would still be a GG. The most direct visual manifestation at this time was the light of the alchemy array that kept flashing on the magic card. The whole process of making the magic potion only truly ended when the light completely subsided. Therefore, he waited for about 3 minutes. Dake's breathing almost stopped when the self-modulation of the magic card was finally completed. He lowered his head to look at the surface of the magic card. Probably because the entire refining process was relatively perfect, the surface of the card was quite clean. Next to a round flask filled with potion, there was a test tube with blue and white liquid. It should be an item card, right? Dake frowned slightly. After refining a potion into a potion card, whether it was a magic card or an item card, the most direct indication was whether there was a container on the card surface. With a container, it belonged to the category of props. In the process of using the item cards, the magic guide fairies had to go through a process of taking. From this point of view, magic cards were more convenient. However, it was not as stable as item cards. It could only be said that each had its own pros and cons. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon you. At the same time, a bottle of blue and white magic potion appeared in the air. Card name, Energy Potion Type, Prop Effect. Restores 200 energy points after consumption. It wasn't a mana recovery potion but an energy potion. The mana recovery potion card, which could restore 100 points of magic power, became an energy potion card, which could restore 200 points of magic power. In addition, after using it once, it also needed to replenish its magic power, or wait for it to restore its magic power to full before it could be used again. All in all, Dake was quite satisfied. Next, he still didn't make the mixed juice of the Screeching Tree Fruit and the Spiral Tree Fruit magic card. Instead, he made another energy potion to practice. After he was proficient enough, he changed to the most basic method of refining a potion into a potion card, and began to try to make the Deaf-Mute potion. With the previous 2 practice sessions and time to drink a cup of apple juice, Dake finally succeeded in refining the Deaf-Mute potion. Card name, Mute Potion Type, Prop Effect. After consumption, no sound can be heard, and no sound can be made. Lasts for 120 seconds. In a duel, 120 seconds was more than enough. Dake seemed to be quite happy. The so-called consumption here could be taken orally or externally. Externally, it could be directly smashed on the opponent's body to take effect. One could imagine how pitiful and helpless the magic guide fairies would be after being smashed by the mute potion. Yes, just like the little evil magic beast now. However, the little evil magic beast had already learned the secret skill, lying dead. As long as it lay on the table and waited for the potion's effect to subside, it would be a good demon again. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Asterisk. The experiment was finally over. Dake summoned the trash slime to help deal with the residue of the experiment. After that, he washed his body and practiced the underworld magic on the bed for an hour before lying down to sleep. The next day, perhaps because he slept late last night, Dake felt a little tired. He climbed onto the deck chair on the balcony and watched the outfit changer, while conserving his energy. Just like that, 2 hours passed. Dake was preparing to review and consolidate the experiment data from last night when there was a knock on the door. To him, this was a very rare occurrence. Since entering the school, there was really no one who had the ability to knock on the door. The main thing was that he always left one step ahead of others and didn't give them much of a chance. Who is it? It's me, the lovely Deanna. It's the gluttonous Deanna. Dake opened the door helplessly and saw Deanna and Luosi standing at the door. He asked, "What's the matter?" Deanna looked at him and invited, "Aren't you going to buy a costume for Halloween?" Luosi agreed, "It's time." Hiss, Dake thought of his crudely made nightgown and nodded. There was only a little more than a week until Halloween, so it was time to prepare. He didn't want to be the laughingstock of the masquerade party. "Then let's go together." Deanna immediately showed a sunny smile. Dake suddenly felt a little dazzled, so he said, "Wait a minute, I'll go change." At around 8:30, the 3 entered Traveler's Street through the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Deanna curiously asked, "Dake, do you have a target in mind?" Dake, Deanna, I mean the costume you like." Dake thought for a while and said, "Just buy a decent dress?" Deanna nodded seriously. The dress is also not bad. But I recommend the Prince of Darkness outfit from the Velvet store. Dake, the Prince of Darkness is more like it. Forget about the Prince of Darkness. Deanna, huh? Dake, I'm kidding. Let's go and have a look. Reach the 5th update of the second, please vote. Chapter 85. Saturday morning, people came and went. Seakeet walked among the crowd with a gloomy expression. He was a second-year student, and as a pure-blooded noble, he had been assigned to the noble house. But that was all in the past. Last year, on the second month of his enrollment at the Shungmalian Academy, his family had fallen into a difficult situation due to his father's political defeat. From a noble to a lowly commoner, the huge psychological drop had caused Seakeet's heart to become twisted. The Shungmalian Academy would not rearrange students based on their family's circumstances. Seakeet had become his family's only hope. He had also become the only commoner in his year at the noble house. Even though his classmates never talked about it due to the etiquette of nobility, they must be laughing at him behind his back, right? With this thought in mind, Seakeet gradually stuffed himself into a cold, pitch-black leather jacket. He remembered the URL. MVIP can't you? VIP. His father had frantically sent him letters through a clerk at Travelers Street, allowing him to finally understand what kind of burden he was carrying on his young shoulders. Becoming a qualified magister could change his family's circumstances. Even if he wasn't a noble, he could still live a good life. If he could become an outstanding magister, he might even be able to return to the noble circle. His mother would always send her voice to him through magic letters, calling his name over and over again. Seakeet. 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 Ah! Seakeet collapsed under the double pressure of internal and external pressure. When one was young, the family's upheaval could indeed allow some people to grow up in an instant, but not every 12-year-old could bear such a heavy burden. Seakeet did not grow up according to his parents' expectations. Instead, he fell into a rut. His grades became worse and worse, and his temper became stranger and stranger. Until Christmas Eve last year, when the girl he had always had a crush on responded to an invitation from a senior, and became his partner at a romantic ball. As a result, he escaped from the youthful scene and rushed into the deepest part of the castle. At that time, the person who had extended an olive branch to him was the leader of the church. Found him. Seakeet's gaze pierced through the gaps between people, and finally caught sight of the heretic who was hugging women in his left and right arms. Velvet clothing shop. Dake was pulled into the crowd by Deanna. He never would have thought that the shop's business would be so good before 9 o'clock. Perhaps this was the legendary reputable store. If he had come by himself, he would have definitely gone to another shop after seeing so many people. But in reality, most people like to squeeze into shops with more people. Perhaps it was because of a crowd mentality, or perhaps it was because they believed that a shop shops. Soon. Dark was pulled to a corner of the shop and stood in front of a mannequin. He could not help but ask, "The Prince of the Night Prince set?" Diana nodded her head like a chicken pecking at rice. But Dake's TT was not that the quality of the Prince of the Night Prince was not good, but the quality was too good, to the point of exaggeration. The material was black velvet, the collar was made of Snow Mountain black fox fur, and there was a fluffy foxtail at the back. The 2 rows of buttons were made of obsidian, and there were even opals on the shoulders. Could the feather cape on the shoulders be the feather of the black raven? That was an ominous symbol of the night. Even though this set of clothing had different shades of black, it gave off a very high-class feeling. But in the end, it could not escape the fact that it was all black. If he walked on the stage of Christmas wearing such a costume, he would instantly become the focus of the stage. Dake did not want to be so eye-catching. And this the half-face black raven mask. However, Diana excitedly pointed at the black raven mask that was studded with black diamonds on the table next to her. Dake could not help but be speechless. Is this thing for people to wear? Which country's prince would dare to dress like this? This is not a world derived from dating games. Dake thought of the only eldest prince of the kingdom. That guy did seem to have this style of dressing. So the people's aesthetic had been led astray by him? Dake's eyes flashed, and suddenly his eyes lit up as he found a reason to refuse. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air. 399 credits. At this price, it seemed that the obsidian, opals, and black diamonds were all products of magical technology. But for a first-year student, it was still an unattainable price. I'd rather buy caterpillar fruit than buy this thing. Thinking of this, Dake prepared a speech and was about to open his mouth to refuse. But Deanna suddenly smiled proudly and pulled him in front of another model at the back. Look, the princess of the night suit. Dake's eyelids twitched. This black velvet princess dress on the female model was indeed worthy of the prince of the night suit, of the same name. Not only was it full of all kinds of exaggerated decorations, but it was also full of frills, as if the more frills there were, the more princess-like it was. Dake was just about to open his mouth to say something. Deanna pointed at one of the labels. 50% discount for couples outfits. Dake's eyelids twitched. Good girl, so this is what you were waiting for? On the other side, Luosi grinned as she picked a white sergeant's uniform and a peacock feather half-mask. She obviously knew what Deanna was up to. In the end, Dake bought the Prince of the Night suit. After a 50% discount, the 200 credits set was still within his acceptable range. And besides other things, the quality of the fabric of this suit was very high. After the boss of the clothing store cast a spell to shrink it, it was very comfortable to wear. If possible, he could even keep it until the Christmas ball. At that time, he could also save a lot of money. After leaving the velvet clothing store, Dake, Deanna, and Luosi walked around the stores and finally came to a high-class restaurant. This restaurant was called Waltz, and was quite famous among the students. It mainly promoted a kind of style. Dake specially ordered the most expensive dessert ice cream for Deanna and Luosi, while he ordered a small cup of ice cream for himself. He was already very familiar with small tricks like this to restrain gluttony. The three of them enjoyed the sweet ice cream in the cool autumn, enjoying a completely different pleasure from summer. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, there were maple leaves falling in the wind and bustling crowds. The smell of youth was like a broken kite, floating higher and higher. Seekeet, who was leaning against a maple tree like an ancient detective, disguised herself with a newspaper. Her face turned green from the smell of youth, and her eyes overflowed with coldness like a poisonous snake. It's coming, a new day is coming. Please subscribe, please subscribe. Buzz buzz. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.